Chapter 588. However, Wu Ming's words confused everyone present. As the person involved, Letitia understood what Wu Ming meant. After all, Wu Ming had already told her what he meant. But even so, Letitia still shook her head helplessly. But, Master Villo, I'll be sold out of the box soon. Moreover, I've also lost my divinity. I really can't become the guardian of no name like you said. What? Senior Letitia, you've lost your divinity? After hearing Letitia's words, Black Rabbit was shocked and his hair slightly changed color. Yes, that's right. I used my divinity as the price in exchange for a period of time where I can move freely. After all, as an item, the only price that Letitia could pay was her most precious thing, her divinity, which was worth this price. And because of this, Letitia's strength was greatly reduced. Wu Ming estimated that Letitia's current strength was probably less than 1/10 of her original strength. Although Wu Ming still didn't understand the division of strength in the box, according to Wu Ming's estimation, Letitia's current strength had fallen to the bottom of the 5-digit range, close to the 6-digit range. Senior Letitia. Realizing the price that Letitia paid, Black Rabbit's eyes began to moisten and his voice began to choke. It had to be said that the price was a bit too high. However, Wu Ming still asked Letitia. Putting aside the current disadvantages, Letitia, let me ask you, do you accept my proposal? I accept. Letitia nodded. Although she didn't understand Wu Ming's meaning, she could only honestly say her true thoughts at this moment. Wu Ming smiled, and 16 knights who saw through Wu Ming's thoughts also smiled. Then everyone, let's go negotiate with the other party. Knight, 2105380 Outer Gate, 1000 Yes Branch. White Yuxia used a paper fan to cover the lower half of his face and looked with interest at Wu Ming, 16 knights, Black Rabbit, and the leader of the community, Ran, sitting in front of him. It's really rare to visit at this time. Do you and No Name have something to ask of us? Although it was a question, White Yuxia, who asked it in a declarative tone, undoubtedly knew the thoughts of No Name. Let's get straight to the point. White Yuxia, can you help us contact the leader of the community where Letitia is currently at? Wu Ming said bluntly. This made Ren tremble in fear. After all, the other party was the star spirit of Taiyang and Bai Yi, the current ruler of the hierarchy, White Yuxia. Shouldn't he be more polite when speaking? However, White Yuxia was not a person who would stick to trifles. He did not mind Wu Ming's words. To be honest, I don't want to see the guy who violated the agreement and brought shame to 1000 Yes. From the looks of it, White Yuxia also knew that the other party had cancelled the gift competition with Letitia as the prize. However, Wu Ming wasn't surprised by White Yuxia's reaction. No matter what, the other party was still a community under the banner of 1000 Yes. Just the fact that they cancelled the gift competition because they wanted to take back the prize made 1000 Yes feel a lot of shame. After all, even if it was the other party's responsibility, the other party was still a community under the banner of 1000 Yes. It was also because of this that White Yuxia had a disgusted expression. But since Black Rabbit is here, I'll kindly tell you. White Yuxia stared at Black Rabbit's full chest and smiled slyly. This made Black Rabbit hug her chest uncomfortably. However, Wu Ming once again realized that finding White Yuxia with Black Rabbit was as useful as getting a pass. I don't know when you found out about it. I found out this morning. White Yuxia began to explain. The community that held the ownership of Letitia was called Perseus. It was a mid-level 5-digit community. The leader of the community was Luo's Perseus. According to White Yuxia, he was a vulgar hedonist with a rough personality. Moreover, according to White Yuxia, the other party had been coveting the aristocrats of the box court for a long time but never had the chance. Ahem, please get to the point, Lord White Yuxia. Wu Ming coughed and slightly emphasized the word, Lord. Ahem. In short, the other party's leader came to me today and said that he wanted to cancel the gift competition with Letitia. This made me angry for a while. It had to be said that White Yuxia was really responsible. As a cadre of 1000 Yes, White Yuxia was furious that Perseus had damaged 1000 Yes' reputation. However, White Yuxia's anger was of no use. Perseus was willing to pay double the compensation and use some special methods to make the scheduled contestants give up the competition. Although these methods were indeed special, In a situation where it wasn't a gift competition and there was no evidence, even White Wuxia, a leader of the hierarchy, couldn't do anything about it. The box court world was extremely free, but in some ways, it also had unparalleled restrictions. In this box court world, sometimes legal procedures were more useful than anything else. After all, the box court system was an invincible existence. In the box court world, one had to follow the box court game to live. This was set by all the gods and Buddhas who first created the box court. No one could change it. Breaking the contract and canceling the gift competition only required the payment of the penalty and the agreement of the scheduled contestants. Of course, there was also the invisible damage to the community's reputation. But the other party didn't make any contact with us. Ren frowned. Although Wuming, 16 Knights, and the other two didn't join No Name when they signed up for the competition, even if No Name wasn't strong enough, they still had to try. Letitia was worried about No Name, and everyone in No Name was also worried about Letitia. Even if they knew they would fail, even if they weren't strong enough, No Name would definitely participate in this gift competition. Because in No Name's view, this wasn't a normal gift competition, but a battle to take back the only partner they had seen in 3 years. The reason why Black Rabbit summoned 16 Knights and the others at this time was also to replenish their combat power. But in the end, who would have thought that the other party would cancel the gift competition without the consent of all the scheduled contestants? After hearing Ren's words, White Wuxia had an "I knew it" expression. I thought so too. Let's not talk about the fact that it's impossible for Luos to contact you. Even if he did contact you and asked you to give up, you would never give up. Only when it came to their companions, No Name would never give up. But I think that Luos probably thought that No Name didn't need to be notified and made the decision on his own. Wuming said without thinking. But no one refuted this sentence. After all, although it was cruel, No Name without a name was indeed often looked down upon by other communities. Then, based on this point, White Wuxia, can you let the other party come over for a discussion? 16 Knights asked. We're begging you, Lord White Wuxia. Please help us. Black Rabbit also had a pleading attitude. Please. Ren also bowed to White Wuxia. At this time, White Wuxia smiled and revealed an expression that said, I've been waiting for you for a long time. We already guessed your request. When you first arrived here, we notified Luos. Now he should be here. At this time, a frivolous man's voice entered everyone's ears. Oh, isn't this you too? It really felt like speaking of the devil. A young man with gold and black hair, a collar around his neck, and boots walked in. He looked like a rich second-generation young master. This guy should be Luos. Everyone looked at the rich second-generation young master who walked in and developed feelings of disgust. Even Wuming had to admit that this guy was an annoying existence. It was as if he had a taunting aura around him. As expected, there is you Tuesday, otherwise, my meaningless journey would have been wasted, Luos said casually. He said it as if Black Rabbit was already in his bag. All right. Luos. Regarding the matter of you canceling the gift competition without the consent of No Name, we have to start the discussion. Please show some of the temperament a leader should have. Ha! Discussion? What kind of joke are you making? If it wasn't for you two, why would I come here to discuss with a mere No Name? Luos looked at Wuming and the others mockingly, then complained to White Wuxia. However, he did not notice the coldness that flashed across Wuming's eyes. Chapter 589. Hey, you guys want that vampire, right? I'm very reasonable. Just give me Moon Rabbit in exchange. Luos had an expression that said, I'm very tolerant. You guys better be sensible. Immediately after, Luos looked at Black Rabbit with a lecherous expression. Please allow me to refuse. Black Rabbit covered her exposed skin with her hands and had an expression that said she would rather die than submit. You're really despicable. Black Rabbit is our No Name's exclusive bunny girl. No one else has the right to have her. 16 Knights had an expression of righteous indignation. That's right. Black Rabbit's No Name, exclusive bunny. No. Wait a minute. Black Rabbit isn't a bunny girl. Black Rabbit, who had been abducted, repeated 16th Knight's words. Halfway through, it reacted and refuted 16th Knight. Mr. 16 Knights is a big idiot. As she spoke, Black Rabbit took out a paper fan and hit 16 Knight's head. However, Luo's was amused by this. Ha ha ha. I can only say that as expected of No Name. If you guys act as comedians, I might reward the two of you. Luo's looked at Wu Ming and the others as if they were clowns. Then I really have to thank you. 16 Knights wasn't angry. Instead, he smiled and responded. Enough fooling around. Wu Ming interrupted Luo's and 16 Knights. Mr. Luo's, right? I would like to ask, who wants to buy Letitia? If possible, please tell me the price. Wu Ming looked at Luo's with a serious and kind tone. That won't do. Luo's shrugged his shoulders with an arrogant and helpless look. I have to protect the privacy of my customers. How can I casually reveal my customers' information? However, the words protect the privacy of my customers did not appear on Luo's, who didn't keep his words. Instead, it was very ironic. However, from Wu Ming's point of view, Luo said this on purpose. Oh, to put it simply, you think that No Name is easy to bully, so you're deliberately making things difficult for us. Wu Ming said bluntly. Even so, Wu Ming's tone was still very kind. Coupled with this sentence, it gave people the feeling that he was admitting defeat. Mr. Villo? Ranha and Black Rabbit looked at Wu Ming in surprise. Of course, they were not surprised by Wu Ming's cowardice, but by Wu Ming's straightforward words. After all, this discussion was only a discussion in name. Was it really appropriate to speak the truth so bluntly? Although this kind of feeling of admitting defeat was also quite disturbing. When Ranhe Black Rabbit opened his mouth to speak, 16 Knights stretched out his hand and blocked Ranhe Black Rabbit, indicating that the two should not speak. However, 16 Knights didn't admit defeat. He knew that Wu Ming already had a plan. Don't be fooled by 16 Knights and lose happy conversation before, but the cold glint in 16 Knights' eyes proved his inner thoughts. Don't be fooled by rebellious 16 Knights' usual sloppy appearance. Rebellious 16 Knights had deep feelings for this new home of No Name. Wu Ming once asked 16 Knights why he joined No Name. I won't let go of the chance to fight with Lord Demon King. I'm someone who will be moved by the truth. That was what 16 Knights told Wu Ming at the time. Because it was exciting to fight with the Demon King, he was moved and joined No Name. But from Wu Ming's point of view, rebellious 16 Knights joined No Name, not only because he could fight with the Demon King, but also because he was moved by the truth. For the sake of No Name, Black Rabbit had been constantly running around for the past 3 years, trying his best to maintain No Name. He even sold his body to White Yuxia. Don't think too much. It was just that White Yuxia said that if Black Rabbit wore the clothes she provided, Black Rabbit's reward as a referee would increase. Ren also took on the responsibility of a community leader at the age of 11, when he should have grown up under the protection of his parents, for the sake of No Name. Rebellious 16 Knights also faced this feeling of being moved by the truth. Therefore, Rebellious 16 Knights was a fake tsundere, cough cough. In short, if it involved the issue of companions, whoever dared to touch his companions, he would make that person pay the price, the kind that would be worse than death. On this point, Wu Ming was the same. Ah, that's right, it's just No Name. Even if you are the scheduled participants, I don't need to ask for your consent to cancel the gift competition, because you are really too insignificant. Luo said arrogantly, ignoring White Yuxia's impatient gaze. Pay attention to your words, kid. Even if No Name is a community without a name, the other party is still a community. It's not reasonable for you to cancel the gift competition without the consent of all the communities. That's why I came to meet with No Name to discuss. Luo's acted like he had taken advantage of Ran Baqian. Didn't I say that as long as it's you two, No Name will do without participating in the gift competition and directly get the prize? Then, Luo's looked at Black Rabbit. And you two is an existence that is willing to sacrifice herself for others. Isn't this a very good suggestion? When Luo's said this, Black Rabbit began to hesitate. Luo's was right. You two had the nature of sacrificing herself for others. It could be seen from the fact that Black Rabbit had been constantly working for No Name for the past 3 years. Although No Name had once helped Black Rabbit, what was more important was the dedication of the U2 clan. Just as Luo's looked at Black Rabbit lecherously and Black Rabbit began to hesitate, Wu Ming suddenly opened his mouth. And it was a violent tone that was the complete opposite of the kind tone from before. It's about time to shut up, Lord Perseus' second-generation ancestor. Wu Ming, who raised his voice by a few decibels, made Luo's tremble and jump in fright. Ranha Black Rabbit was also shocked, but the focus of everyone's attention was not on Ranha Black Rabbit, but on Luo's and Wu Ming. When White Yuxia saw that Luo's was frightened, he began to look at Luo's as if he was a piece of trash. Feeling White Yuxia's gaze, Luo's felt embarrassed. However, White Yuxia was an existence that he could not afford to offend, so he could only vent his anger on No Name, who provoked him and could afford to provoke him. It's just No Name. Do you think you're the only ones with a loud voice? Luo's shouted angrily. Aya, I'm sorry for being loud. I just didn't expect the leader of Perseus to be so cowardly. Wu Ming apologized with a mocking expression. Wu Ming's words and his mocking status made Luo's angry. However, Luo smiled. I know, you're purposely provoking me so that I can continue with the gift competition. Then, Luo's continued to speak arrogantly. I've already seen through your plan. No Name! ! But Wu Ming also laughed. Are you really the descendant of that hero? You self-righteous idiot. Chapter 590. Ha! What do you mean? Luo's frowned and looked at Wu Ming. Although Luo's was a rich second generation who only cared about eating, drinking and having fun, he was still very proud of his bloodline. Wu Ming's words caused Luo's anger to increase by another notch. Isn't this very obvious? Wu Ming purposely put on a very helpless face. Why would you think that if I angered you, I would let you continue with the bestowment competition? These two are completely unrelated. I'm just telling the truth. You were really shocked just now, weren't you? Wu Ming's words made Luo's unable to refute. He was indeed shocked. This point was seen by everyone present, including White Yuxia, who had always looked down on Luo's. Furthermore, my suspicions of whether you are the descendant of the hero Perseus were not wrong. Luo's community name was Perseus, which was Perseus, the hero who killed the snake-haired demon Medusa. Since he dared to use Perseus as his name, then the first leader of this community should be that hero. In the box courtyard world, it was common for heroes in myths and legends to come to the box courtyard. After many heroes completed their deeds, they would be summoned to the box courtyard. This was what Wu Ming saw when he was reading the history books of the box courtyard in the underground library of No Name. After Perseus died, he ascended to the immortal constellation mountain. At the same time, he was summoned to the box courtyard and started his story again. This was considered the creation of the community, Perseus. Therefore, every generation of leaders of Perseus was the direct descendant of Perseus. Therefore, Wu Ming's suspicions towards Luo's should not be suspected of Luo's. But who asked Luo's to be a rich second generation? He did not have the demeanor of his ancestor at all. I heard that Perseus is a 5-digit community, but you want to move to a 6-digit community. You are really a rich second generation who ruined your ancestors' business. Then Wu Ming continued to taunt, or rather, insult. A spoiled brat like you who doesn't think about improving himself and only knows how to eat, drink, and play. I'm afraid you've already used up all the treasures left behind by Perseus. Wu Ming wasn't wrong. Perseus left behind many treasures for Perseus, but when it reached Luo's generation, other than the scythe sword, invisibility helmet, flying boots and other incomparably important treasures of Perseus, the other treasures were basically consumed by Luo's. How was it consumed? Of course, it was for Luo's to enjoy himself. This was also why Luo's wanted to move the Perseus from the 5-digit middle tier to the 6-digit lower tier. Because they no longer had the qualifications and strength to stay in the middle class. No Name is giving you face by participating in your gift competition. It's fine if you have a grateful look, but who are you trying to show your arrogance to? I have seen Perseus before. Although he also has an annoying look, compared to you, he's still far behind. Ignoring everyone's surprise at Wu Ming saying that he had seen Perseus before, Wu Ming acted as if he had discovered something. Ayaya, you see, I'm really rude. Doesn't this mean that you are really the descendant of the hero Perseus? That's great. At least you are not a bastard that came out of nowhere. Otherwise, I would really have to mourn for Perseus. Everyone was dumbfounded. Who would have thought that Wu Ming, who was considered steady among the problematic children of 16 knights, would be so special. However, Wu Ming didn't stop. But compared to this, isn't it more proof that you are the descendant of Perseus? You have ruined this bloodline. As expected, you have to be careful. I think you should directly move the community to 7 digits. Otherwise, you will be in trouble if you provoke someone you shouldn't. All right. Wu Ming acted as if he had good intentions. Our 2105380 outer door is quite spacious. Do you want to squeeze in with us? Seeing that you are Perseus, we, no name, will take care of you. Shut up. From the beginning, when Wu Ming insulted Luoz was already slightly angry. The more Wu Ming said, the angrier Luoz became. In the end, the veins on his head popped out. With a roar, Luoz took out his gift card and took out a sickle-shaped sword. He slashed down at Wu Ming's head. That should be the legendary weapon against immortality, the scythe sword harp. Be careful. Ran and the Black Rabbit were shocked. As a god relic, it could already cause harm to White Wuxia. Naturally, this weapon could also cause harm to Wu Ming. However, 16 knights and White Wuxia were unfazed. Luoz and the rest's indulgence had weakened his ability by a lot. One could say that if it weren't for Perseus' gift card, Luoz would not have been able to stay in the 5 digits. He would have been pushed down to the 6 digits long ago. White Wuxia and 16 knights did not think that Luoz could hurt Wu Ming. Both of them wanted to take the opportunity to see Wu Ming's ability. However, it was true that Luoz could not hurt Wu Ming. It was just that both of them were surprised by Wu Ming's defense against Luoz's attack. Both of them thought that Wu Ming might dodge or block Luoz's attack. However, they never thought that Wu Ming would be able to control Luoz without moving his body at all. That was right. He was controlled. At that moment, Harp was less than a centimeter away from Wu Ming's head. One could say that if Wu Ming moved a little, Harp would slash him. However, Luoz's body did not move at all at that moment. What's happening? What did you do? Luoz said in a panic. Although his body could not move, Luoz could still move his mouth. You bastard. What did you do to me? Luoz was really panicking. After all, anyone who was controlled by such an inexplicable method would also be panicking. Hey. You're the descendant of a hero. Don't panic, all right? Wu Ming shrugged helplessly. Oh, is this your telekinesis? I didn't expect it to reach such a level. White Wuxia opened his paper fan and smiled. It could only be said that White Wuxia was indeed the strongest star spirit. He could see the essence of Wu Ming's power at a glance. After all, I'm also a spirit. It's only natural that I have strong mental strength. Wu Ming smiled. What controlled Luoz was the telekinesis formed from pure mental strength. Wu Ming completely attached his telekinesis to Luoz's body. As a result, the telekinesis that was many times stronger than Luoz's had firmly locked him in place. It was as if he was frozen by an invisible ice block. Moreover, it was an ice block that was 10,000 years old. What? Telekinesis? How can such a weak power control me? Luoz roared angrily and began to struggle free from Wu Ming's telekinesis. However, it was useless. Luoz still couldn't move. He couldn't even tremble slightly. Luoz was completely suppressed by Wu Ming's telekinesis. Don't waste your energy. I even controlled the giant god to float in the sky for fun. You're just a spoiled brat who has been spoiled by eating, drinking, and having fun. How can you break free? Wu Ming mocked. Then, Wu Ming took Hefel from Luoz's hand and examined it in his hand. It's indeed a good artifact. If I didn't already have Hefel, I'm afraid this would be mine. However, Black Rabbit couldn't help but complain. I feel that Mr. Villo is more mysterious than we thought. How can that be? I'm just a somewhat special spirit. Then, Wu Ming smiled. However, this smile was like a demon in Luoz's eyes. Putting the scythe aside, Wu Ming snapped his fingers. Padash in an instant, a piece of parchment appeared in Wu Ming's hand out of thin air. Then, under the witness of Lord White Wuxia, the ruler of the hierarchy, Lord Luoz, please sign this document. Then, under Luoz's horrified gaze, Luoz pressed his fingerprint on this unknown document. Chapter 591. After controlling Luo's like a marionette, Wuming removed his control over Luo's. "You despicable bastard!" Luo's was just about to explode in anger when a terrifying gaze locked onto him. Wuming's ruby-like pupils had turned into vertical slits. The pressure that was precisely controlled by Wu Ming pressed down on Luo's as though it was aimed at him. "I just don't want to bully you too much. If you're not afraid of death, you can try. Or you can take out the star spirit on your neck." Wu Ming glanced at the necklace with a snake-haired banshee's head on Luo's neck and continued. "The prerequisite is that you're prepared to die." At that moment, Luo's felt like he was looking at a terrifying giant dragon. Pure blood. Dragon species. Luo's body trembled as he muttered involuntarily. Hearing this, White Yuxia squinted his eyes and looked at Wu Ming with interest. This made Wu Ming shrug his shoulders helplessly. Then, Wu Ming smiled at Luo's. "All right, Master Luo's, you can return to your community. Of course, the Letitia gift competition will continue tomorrow. You know what I mean, right?" Wu Ming smiled and waved the parchment with Luo's handprint in front of Luo's. Instantly, Luo seemed to have thought of something and his face turned into the color of pig liver. In the end, Luo's left without saying a word. He left helplessly as if he was dead. When Luo's pressed his handprint, Wu Ming purposely slowed down to allow Luo's to see what was on the parchment. At that moment, Luo's fully understood what kind of existence he had provoked. He was completely done for. Speaking of which, what is the content of the document that Mr. Villo made Luo's sign? Black Rabbit asked excitedly. However, White Yuxia, who was interested in Wu Ming's tricks, directly extended his hand. "Quick, kid, let me take a look," White Yuxia said as he instantly snatched the parchment from Wu Ming's hand. Everyone gathered around White Yuxia and read the contents on the parchment together. Bestowed game name, ownership of Perseus, contestant, Luo's Pathos contestant's winning condition. Remain calm and not feel fear in the face of the host's coercion. Winning condition. The contestant cannot meet the winning condition. Oath. Respecting the above content, based on the glory, flag, and authority of the organizer, this game of blessings will be held. Seal of Originate God. Ah! Ran He, Black Rabbit, and even White Yuxia were all shocked. Their screams made Wu Ming and 16 knights, who were behind them, take a step back. "What's wrong with you guys?" Wu Ming scratched his ears and shook his head, which was shocked by the sound of surprise, with a helpless look on his face. Wait. Mr. Villo, is this the authority of the organizer?" Black Rabbit looked excited. Wu Ming nodded honestly. "It is the authority of the organizer, but why are you guys so excited?" "But Mr. Villo, that is the highest authority that very few people can hold." Rin didn't know what to say. "Even we are a little out of place. Speaking of which, when did thou obtain the authority of the organizer?" White Yuxia used a paper fan to cover the lower half of his face to hide his gaffe. "I don't know the exact time. If I have to say, it should be before I came here," Wu Ming thought. Or rather, it was when he was at the No-Name base. In No-Name's base, I suddenly realized that I had gained a new ability. This ability allowed me to force people to participate in my bestowment competition. Wu Ming looked at everyone. If not for that, Wu Ming wouldn't have chosen to negotiate with Luo's directly. In other words, Wu Ming had already decided that if the leader of Perseus was a decent person, then Wu Ming would try to negotiate with him on the issue of Letitia. And if the other party was an annoying fellow, then sorry, Wu Ming would deal with him directly. After the initial meeting and brief discussion with Luo's, Wu Ming chose the latter. It could only be said that this second generation was too unlucky. Being arrogant and despotic for a long time made him forget his respect for the strong. Even in front of White Yuxia, he was arrogant, not to mention the No-Name that had no name and flag. However, no one had ever told him that even in No-Name, there were strong people. Omega. And this second generation just happened to bump into Wu Ming's gun. After speaking rudely to Wu Ming out of anger, Wu Ming used his coercion to target him. And ever since Luo's pressed down his handprint, he had already begun his bestowment competition with Wu Ming. After developing a fear of Wu Ming, this guy's community, Perseus, no longer belonged to him, but to the victor, Wu Ming. This once again showed that Luo's had lost his respect for the strong because of eating, drinking, and having fun for a long time. If he still knew respect, then he wouldn't have gotten angry at Wu Ming, who had the authority of the bestowment competition and was clearly a strong person. Wasn't that an act of seeking death? Wuming believed that anyone with a little bit of foresight wouldn't have done what Luo's did. Instead, they would have faced Wuming in a more rational and kind way. After all, he was facing a hot-tempered guy like Luo's. If it was someone else, Wuming wouldn't have put his courage to the test. However, even if Luo's didn't get angry on the spot, Wuming wasn't afraid that he wouldn't fall for it because the document didn't have a time limit. In other words, it could continue until Luo's became fearful. That was how word games were played. And through the authority of the bestowment competition, Wuming also saw the power of this authority. No wonder the Demon King was called a natural disaster. If Wuming carried out such a flawed bestowment competition with Perseus, then they definitely wouldn't have a chance of winning. Well, now that I think about it, if a strong person like you obtained the authority of the bestowment competition, then we wouldn't be so surprised. White Wuxia smiled. Speaking of which, just now Luo's mentioned a pure-blooded dragon species. Is Mr. Villo a pure-blooded dragon species? Black Rabbit asked excitedly. This made everyone focus their attention on Wuming. Other than 16 knights, everyone present knew about the existence of pure-blooded dragon species. Wuming's words were also seen in the underground library of no name. Even in the box court world with many strong people, there were also the existence of the three strongest races: star spirits, natural gods, and pure-blooded dragons. The highest-ranking star spirits of the ghost species, elves, and demons races. The god spirits of natural gods and Buddhas, the pinnacle of phantom beasts, and the pure-blooded dragon species that didn't have the tree of evolution. These three represented the three strongest races in the box court. Among them, the strongest could be said to be the star spirits. This was because the star spirits were the only existence that didn't have much relationship with humans. The other two races were more or less related to humans, and from a certain perspective, it was a fatal relationship. As an example of the star spirits, White Wuxia was the best example. White Wuxia was the star spirit of the sun and white night. The best explanation for natural god spirits was those gods that didn't evolve. A typical natural god spirit was in Greek mythology. Zeus and the others were basically natural gods. As for the pure-blooded dragon species, it was a little strange. The pure-blooded dragon species weren't born, but an existence that appeared out of thin air due to the sudden convergence of a powerful force. It was very suitable for the name, fantasy species. Such an existence often looked like a dragon, so it was called the pure-blooded dragon species. The pure-blooded dragon species would only have pure-blooded descendants through single reproduction. Combining with a mutant species would only give birth to a sub-dragon. Wuming had the experience of his eyes turning into vertical pupils. Coupled with Luo's words, everyone couldn't help but suspect Wuming's identity. Actually, if I have to say, I'm an existence that's stronger than those things. Wuming smiled. Chapter 592. After White Wuxia heard Wuming's words, he showed a thoughtful expression. What does that mean? Black Rabbit was very confused by Wuming's ambiguous answer. Ren had the same expression as Black Rabbit. On the other hand, 16 Knights Reverse looked excited. Needless to say, this guy was definitely excited because Wuming was a powerhouse. Forget it, just treat him as a pure-blooded dragon. Wuming sighed. After all, it was not easy to explain the existence of Wuming's origin dragon, so it was better to treat him as a pure-blooded dragon. However, everyone was very dissatisfied with Wuming's perfunctory answer. Immediately, 16 Knights Reverse exploded. Don't worry about that, little brother. Come and fight with me first, 16 Knights Reverse said directly. Please allow me to refuse. Wuming looked at 16 Knights Reverse helplessly. Tisk, you really run away after getting an advantage, 16 Knights Reverse said unhappily. Although Wuming did not see any way that he got an advantage. Alright, it's getting late. Tomorrow is Letitia's gift competition. Let's go home and sleep early. With that, Wuming stood up. Home, huh? Ran and Black Rabbit pondered. When they thought of Letitia returning to No Name tomorrow, the two of them could not help but smile. Then we won't send you off. White Wuxia waved his hand casually. After that, everyone thanked Bai Yasha and left. After all, without White Wuxia's care, Wuming would not have been able to meet Luo so quickly and trick him. After Wu Ming and the others left, White Yuxia was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he continued to sit in the room. White Yuxia looked at the parchment in his hand and muttered carefully. Originate God. The God of origin, huh? Then, White Yuxia's mouth curled up. Oh Luos, you really offended a terrifying guy who is no weaker than me. On the way back to No Name, Black Rabbit was in a good mood and skipped in front. Wu Ming, 16 Knights, and Ren walked at the back, but from their brisk footsteps, they seemed to be in a good mood. After all, he had achieved his goal. Speaking of which, why didn't Mr. Villo directly ask Luos to release Letitia? Ren asked. After all, Perseus was now Wu Ming's possession, so why would he waste time and effort to hold a gift competition for Letitia? Wouldn't it be better to just transfer Letitia to No Name? That won't do, little guy. Our No Name still needs to promote. 16th Knight held her head with both hands and said in a light tone. 16th Knights is right. Because of Letitia, our plan to use Guard to promote No Name was ruined. Ren, have you forgotten? With Wu Ming's reminder, Ren also remembered that their original purpose was to promote the freshmen of No Name. In the end, because he was attracted by Letitia, Ren directly forgot about it. Sorry. Ren smiled embarrassedly. After all, Ren is only an 11-year-old child. With 16th Knights and I here, you can rest assured and train your ability as a leader. We will do everything well. Wu Ming patted Ren's little head. Thank you, Mr. Villo, Mr. 16th Knights. Ren said emotionally. Ren and 16th Knight smiled because of this. Then, 16th Knight seemed to have thought of something and laughed. But speaking of which, it's really interesting. Our plan was ruined because of the blonde lowly, and now we have to promote No Name through the blonde lowly. Indeed, because Letitia defeated Guard, the gift competition between Wu Ming and the others in Guard was cancelled. However, the communities that were enslaved by Guard were freed. Although they were also very grateful to No Name, they praised White Yuxia's brilliance more. After all, it was White Yuxia who directly intervened to punish Guard and force the disbandment of Forsgaro. However, the promotion of No Name was done. However, because of Letitia's matter, Wu Ming directly used the gift competition to take over Perseus, and let Perseus give up the deal with the unknown person and continue the competition with Letitia as the prize. As for whether No Name could win and win back Letitia, Wu Ming and 16th Knight smiled and didn't say anything. What a joke. The organizers were all on their side. With such convenient conditions, if they still couldn't win the gift competition, then No Name could disband. Of course, it didn't mean that they were going to cheat. Master Little Guy, tomorrow you will see the blonde lowly return to No Name. 16th Knights was ready to make a move. Then, 16th Knights looked at Wu Ming. You are not allowed to compete with me for the right to participate in this gift competition, little brother. Don't worry, I will definitely not compete with you. After all, with Wu Ming's secrets revealed one by one, Wu Ming could be said to be constantly whetting 16th Knight's appetite. Even 16th Knights had a temper. Although Wu Ming didn't have the slightest bit of guilt, he still let 16th Knights make a move this time. If I make you sick, then the gains will not make up for the losses. Wu Ming joked. Heh, at least you know what's good for you. 16th Knights and Wu Ming looked at each other and smiled. They reached out a hand, clenched it into a fist, and pressed it against each other. Sometimes, things like friendship were often the same as love. It could be love at first sight. In less than 2 days, Wu Ming and 16th Knights could be said to be friends. In other words, the 4 problem children who joined No Name could be said to be friends. After all, birds of a feather flock together. Sometimes, fate was such a wonderful thing. Right, Mr. Villo, you just took Mr. Luo's community into your pocket. Will you be treated as a demon king? Black Rabbit said worriedly. Ren also came to his senses. Mr. Villo, this is indeed a problem. However, Wu Ming shook his head. Although it seems like I used the organizer's authority very casually, Luo's voluntarily pressed his handprint. This isn't considered forcing him. Wu Ming smiled like a rascal. This made Black Rabbit a little confused. Indeed, the reason why the Demon King was called the Demon King was because he arbitrarily abused the organizer's authority. However, Wu-ming really didn't force Luo's. Luo's voluntarily pressed his handprint and agreed to participate in Wu-ming's gift competition. However, this voluntarily made Ranhe Black Rabbit a little helpless. It was clearly Yu who forced him. As the leader of the hierarchy, White Yaksha was a witness. Luo's could only accept it. 16th Knights helplessly smiled. All right, White Yaksha was an accomplice. That was why Wu-ming thanked him. You can say that White Yaksha is turning a blind eye. After all, Luo's is quite annoying to White Yaksha. Wu-ming said as he walked. Forget it. As long as nothing happens. Ren's shoulders drooped. He had already given up. It was fine as long as he didn't cause any trouble. Gradually, the abandoned building of no name appeared in front of everyone. Then, let's bring this good news to everyone. Chapter 593. In other words, Letitia's gift competition will be held as usual, right? Zhou Yuao crossed her arms and nodded unhappily. After Wu Ming and the others returned to no name, they told Komoto Asaka and Kasuga Biao, who were guarding Letitia's side, about what happened. I'm not happy. Why is 16 Knights participating in tomorrow's gift competition? Why can't Yuao and I participate? Haruai Buyao looked at everyone with an unhappy tone. That's right, Jiao Yuao and Haruai Buyao were unhappy because Letitia's gift competition was given to 16 Knights instead of them. There's nothing we can do about it. Ladies, your gift competition was yesterday. 16 Knights reverse smiled. But that gift competition was cancelled because of Letitia. Zhou Yuao protested. I don't care. It's my turn anyway. 16 Knights smiled and shrugged. He was like a child, acting shamelessly. All right, everyone. This time, it's about who Letitia belongs to. I only let Letitia continue with the gift competition, but I didn't let him change the content. In other words, the content of the gift competition is still unknown. Let's just let 16 Knights participate. Wu-ming helplessly tried to persuade them. After all, even if it's a companion, I won't reveal the content of the gift competition. Wu-ming smiled as if it was a matter of course. This time, even Jiao Yuao and Haruai Buyao, these two problem children, didn't say anything. If the gift competition was about fighting, then the two of them would really be in trouble. After all, if they were to compare their combat power, the two of them wouldn't be as good as 16 Knights. Haruai Buyao, who had the life catalogue, was still okay. At the very least, it was a gift related to the body. However, Jiao Yuao really couldn't do it. After all, her gift was only in the aspect of domination. Even though Jiao Yuao completely controlled Guard, that was only because Guard was too weak. If she encountered a more powerful opponent, then her gift would be completely useless. Take Luo's as an example. No matter how useless Luo's was, no matter how much of a playboy he was still the descendant of Perseus. Wu-ming guessed no, he was certain. If ancient flying bird used the grace of domination on Luo's, who had hero's blood flowing in his veins, then it would only last for a short while before Luo's forcefully broke it open. Wu-ming smiled when he saw Jiao Fei-fei's disappointed expression. How about this, flying bird? After Letitia returns to no name, let's study your gift. My gift? Jiao Yuanfei was stunned. That's right. Wu-ming nodded. After all, when White Yaksha praised the grace for us, he said that the grace of the three of you can be said to be the strongest human grace. When Wu-ming said this, everyone reacted. Although Jiao Yuanfei's gift seemed to only be able to control one person, the existence that White Yaksha called the strongest human grace wasn't that simple. Maybe your gift isn't just for controlling others, it might have other effects. Jiao Yuanfei nodded with anticipation at Wu-ming's suggestion. Okay then, but after all, for the sake of Letitia's ownership, let's let 16 Knights fight in tomorrow's gift competition. Jiao Yuanfei nodded rather proudly, and agreed. I'm sorry to trouble everyone. At this time, Letitia said rather guiltily. After all, everything this time was caused by Letitia. Although everyone didn't say anything and even enjoyed it, Letitia didn't take it for granted. On the contrary, Letitia, who was especially considerate of her companions, felt even more guilty. Letitia senpai. Black Rabbit looked at Letitia like this and suddenly had tears in her eyes. Then her ears were grabbed by Jiao Yuanfei and Kasuga Hibiya. Wah! Wah! What are the two of you doing? Black Rabbit burst into tears. He covered his ears with tears and looked at the two of them. It's just Black Rabbit. Don't make it so sad. Kasuga Hibiya said expressionlessly. You're a Hakata noble. You should be more elegant. Jiao Yuanfei smiled. How about Hakata noble? Shame. I think Hakata noble laughter. How about that? Wah! You two problem children. Letitia looked at the problem children who were causing trouble again and couldn't help but smile. It was a very warm kind. Then, Letitia felt a hand on her head. So, you should accept your companion's help as a matter of course. Wuming rubbed Letitia's head while watching Black Rabbit being teased by Jiao Yuanfei and Kasuga Hibiya. Vilo-sama. Letitia didn't know what to say anymore. And this is not without a price. If you accept my power, you will become my dependent and be the guardian of no name for the rest of your life. Then, Wuming looked at Letitia. Are you prepared for this? Letitia's expression froze, and her eyes firmly met Wuming's eyes. Yes. Vilo-sama, Letitia is prepared. Wuming smiled. Then, go to sleep early, and return to No Name tomorrow. Okay. It was late at night, and the moon hung high in the sky, shining down on this lifeless land. The last light in No Name went out, and everyone fell asleep. The next day, everyone woke up early. Whether it was Ran, Black Rabbit, or the three problem children, they all finished their breakfast early and went to No Name's meeting room. Jiao Yuanfei looked at the meeting room with no sign of the two, and was confused. HM? Where did Vilo and Letitia go? Are they still lazing around in bed? Could it be that the two of them stayed up very late last night, and are too tired to get up? Haruai Hiroyuki said with a blank expression. This made the very pure and innocent Black Rabbit instantly blush. This reminded her of the first time she saw Letitia yesterday, when Wuming and Letitia had intimate contact. How could that be? How could Vilo-sama and Letitia do that kind of thing together? Yao-sen, you should watch your words. I didn't say what kind of thing it was. Could it be that Black Rabbit really wanted to see that kind of thing? Haruai Hiroyuki covered his mouth, and showed a proud smile. Of course not. Black Rabbit didn't think that way. Black Rabbit blushed and refuted Haruai Hiroyuki. I didn't expect Black Rabbit to be so impure. As expected of a Hakata noble, shameless. Jiao Yuanfei also joked. You two problematic adults. Black Rabbit was crying from the two of them. 16th Night casually looked at this farce, and sat down and looked at Ren beside him. Then, did the two of them go to Perseus? Ren nodded. As expected of 16th Night, Mr. Vilo-sama and Letitia-sama really did go to Perseus. As he said this, Ren took out a piece of paper with Wuming's message written on it. There's no need to look. I just want to see if my guess is correct. As he said this, 16th Night casually walked to the window with his hands on his head. Then, 16th Night mischievously shouted at Jiao Yuanfei and Haruai Hiroyuki who were still teasing Black Rabbit. Hey! It's almost time. I'm going to participate in the gift competition. However, Jiao Yuanfei and Haruai Hiroyuki instantly looked at 16th Night, and their eyes were red like ghosts. Don't even think about running away. That's right. Even if I can't participate in the gift competition, I must watch. Ha ha ha. Then, let's see if you can catch up to me. 16th Night said as he jumped out of the window. Mr. 16th Night? Ran and Black Rabbit were shocked, but they immediately reacted. 16th Night wasn't an ordinary person. Don't run. Jiao Yuanfei and Haruai Hiroyuki said as one ran out of the room and the other jumped out of the window. Wait, Miss Flying Bird, Miss Hiroyuki. As expected of the gift, Moon Rabbit. Even if she was teased by the two, Black Rabbit would still worry about them. Then, Black Rabbit also ran out, leaving Ran alone. Everyone, wait a minute. Chapter 594. On Wuming's side. At present, Wuming was not at the place where Perseus was hosting the gift competition. Instead, He was at a certain corner of World's End. However, Wu Ming had indeed sent Laetitia back to Perseus. This time, however, Laetitia was treated as a guest of honor. Last night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Wu Ming had quietly left No Name and made a trip to Perseus. Although Perseus was already Wu Ming's possession, Wu Ming was not like those arrogant people who could just sit back and relax. No matter what, Luoz was still a descendant of Perseus. Who knows what kind of tricks Luoz might play? After all, the gift competition was mostly a game of words. There were many loopholes to be found. Even though Perseus was essentially Wu Ming's private property, if some thief or robber were to loot Perseus, then Wu Ming would suffer a loss. However, it just so happened that Wu Ming had bumped into some thief who was trying to steal his property. This gave Wu Ming a pleasant surprise. This gave him a reason to properly teach Luoz a lesson. After teaching Luoz a lesson, Wu Ming made a trip to Perseus' storage room and stored all the treasures in Perseus into his dragonist. Wu Ming completely ignored the fact that Luoz was unable to accept the fact that he had fainted. As Luoz's loyal subordinates were about to take Luoz away, Wu Ming casually removed the snake-haired banshee's collar from Luoz's neck. The members of Perseus who were taught a lesson by Wu Ming dared not say anything. They could only bring Luoz away from Wu Ming. After that, Wu Ming personally ordered and supervised the members of Perseus to set up the gift competition venue overnight. Ignoring the exhaustion of the members of Perseus, under Wu Ming's intense pressure, the previously abandoned gift competition venue was rebuilt overnight. Wu Ming nodded his head in satisfaction and then left. This allowed the members of Perseus to breathe a sigh of relief. However, when Wu Ming left Perseus, he left a huge crack in the ground beside Perseus. This caused the members of Perseus to suck in a breath of relief. After returning to No Name, Wu Ming rested until the sun was about to rise, when he woke up. It had to be said that Wu Ming's mental state was a special characteristic. Wu Ming had an incomparably powerful mental state. He did not need to sleep. However, it was just like 3 meals and snacks. Although Wu Ming did not need the normal 3 meals, he could still enjoy snacks. Wu Ming would not have the time to not rest. Coincidentally, Laetitia had also woken up early because she was a little excited. However, this was also good. After all, Laetitia was still an item of Perseus. Afterwards, Wu Ming brought Laetitia to Perseus and allowed her to move around freely in Perseus as if she was the mistress of the place. This made Laetitia a little dumbfounded. However, under Wu Ming's constant petting, Laetitia obediently accepted. Although Perseus was not happy, because of Luoz's failure in the gift competition, the owner of Perseus was Wu Ming. Therefore, they had to listen to Wu Ming. Or they could choose to leave Perseus. However, this group of loyal officials chose to stay. It was said that it was because of Luoz's father. They had decided to serve Luoz for the rest of their lives. Wu Ming gave a ridiculing smile once more. If Luoz was slightly more ambitious, even if he could not reach 4 digits, at the very least, Perseus would not fall to 5 digits. After instructing the gift competition to start on time and instructing everyone to invite He Tu as the referee, Wu Ming left. Wu Ming believed that this matter concerned the ownership of Laetitia. He Tu would surely take up the role of referee. After all, if someone were to cheat in this competition without He Tu as the referee and win, He Tu would have nowhere to cry. However, after leaving Perseus, Wu Ming did not immediately return to No Name. Instead, he went to Wu Ming's current location, World's End. Before leaving, Wu Ming went to look for Luoz and asked him about the person who wanted to buy Laetitia. In the end, Luoz, who had been so arrogant earlier, answered Wu Ming's question. A pure-blooded dragon species, Luoz believed, was not to be messed with. Even so, the only answer Wu Ming received was that the other party was a young female in black. Other than that, there was nothing else. This caused Wu Ming to wonder if Luoz was playing with him. However, Luoz's old face trembled in fear as he assured Wu Ming that he was not biased. The other party's black cloak seems to have the effect of concealing one's face. I can only tell that it is a female. Those were Luoz's own words. However, there were many types of clothing that could conceal one's face. After that, Luoz was beaten up by Wu Ming. You only know how to eat, drink and have fun. Can't you do something useful? Wu Ming complained helplessly. Even so, Luoz was helpless. He only wanted to eat, drink and have fun. According to Luoz, the other party had suddenly come over and said that they wanted to buy Laetitia using something that Luoz was satisfied with. If not for that, Luo's would not have suddenly cancelled the gift competition. However, the other party had maintained a sense of mystery and did not tell Luo's what they wanted to buy. In Wu Ming's opinion, the other party might be here to get a free meal. When the time for the transaction came, they would simply rape Letitia. After beating up Luo's again, Wu Ming asked if there was any meeting point. However, Luo said that she would come over on her own when the time was right. That caused Wu Ming to feel displeased. Then, in order to avoid getting beaten up again, Luo's mind raced as he recalled the other party's words. If there is anything urgent, just come to World's End. That was the reason why Wu Ming had come to World's End. However, the man in black who wanted to buy Letitia did not specify how to do so. He only said that he wanted to come to World's End. Thus, Wu Ming had no way of finding him. However, even if he could not find him, it would not matter. Wu Ming was simply displeased with how the other party was treating Letitia as an item. Thus, he wanted to see if he could find him and beat him up. Even if he could not find him, it would not matter. However, the heavens are always looking out for me. As he thought about that, Wu Ming turned to look at the man in black who had just emerged from the small forest. However, when Wu Ming sensed that the other party was emitting a powerful aura that seemed to be meant to intimidate him, he smiled. It would appear that he had caught a big fish. Is there something that Luo's wants to say? The man in black spoke up. His voice was that of a very sweet young girl. Add her petite figure to the equation. It was no wonder Luo's told him that she was a young female man in black. Next, Wu Ming smiled. Sir Luo's wants me to tell you that the transaction is off. Chapter 595. Reject. Facing Wu Ming's sudden rejection, the girl in black was clearly stunned. Perhaps in the girl's eyes, Luo's, this trash, would not reject. But now, the situation was out of her expectations. But this way, the girl in black also noticed that something was not right. From the intelligent girl's point of view, Luo's, this rich second generation, would not reject their deal. Then there were two possibilities. Either Luo's was unable to continue the deal due to other matters, such as being threatened, or the man in front of her was lying to her. For example, the man in front of her was the one who threatened Luo's. To be able to represent Luo's in rejecting the deal, the man in front of her was definitely not as simple as he looked. All in all, this seemingly ordinary little specter must have a lot to do with Luo's rejecting their deal. Thus, the slightly unhappy girl decided to make a move on the man in front of her to make up for her unhappiness. Just because he said he would cancel, what kind of people do you think we are? The girl in black said rudely to Wu Ming. The girl in black had already started, so she needed to pick a fight. But Wu Ming also wanted to have a good talk with the girl in front of him who was not simple. That's because Lord Luo's can't even protect himself, so he had no choice but to cancel the deal with you. Wu Ming was not angry at the girl's rudeness, but instead replied her with a light tone. Can't even protect himself? Wu Ming's words made the girl in black interested. But according to what I know, Perseus has been doing well recently, and is even preparing to migrate to 6 figures. This made Wu Ming smile. Oh, I didn't think that a rat like you who hides outside the box would have such a good way to gather information. Wu Ming smiled. However, the scoundrel in Wu Ming's words angered the black-clothed girl. A mere spectre dares to call His Highness a rat. The girl was completely angered by Wu Ming's insults. In an instant, the girl's figure disappeared. In the next second, the girl's figure appeared in front of Wu Ming. It looked like the girl was throwing herself at Wu Ming. But no matter how he thought about it, it was impossible. The girl took out a small knife from under her black cloak and stabbed towards Wu Ming, who was very close to her. But Wu Ming did not care about the girl's attack. Instead, he was thinking about the girl's words. Listening to the girl's words, it seemed like this His Highness was her master. This was really interesting. Someone who could be addressed as Your Highness was definitely not a simple person. While Wu Ming was thinking, the girl's dagger's finger. Generally speaking, daggers shouldn't be effective against ghosts, but Wu Ming could tell that the girl's dagger wasn't an ordinary dagger. Although this dagger did not look like a divine artifact, there must be something special about it. At the very least, it could stab spirits. After all, Wu Ming did not think that this seemingly shrewd girl would do such an embarrassing thing. Indeed, just as Wu Ming had guessed, the girl's dagger could hurt beings like spirits. But in essence, such a dagger was just a special dagger that was mass-produced. It wasn't that precious. It was only because of the girl's fighting style that she used such a dagger. Then, the girl in black's dagger directly stabbed into Wu Ming's body. In the girl's opinion, the arrogant specter in front of her did not have the chance to react and was killed by her. However, Wu Ming could not be stabbed to death by a slightly special dagger. Or rather, it could not even cause any damage to Wu Ming. If I'm really an ordinary specter, maybe I can really go to hell. Ah! Hearing Wu Ming's tone that did not sound like he was weak after being stabbed, the girl in black was obviously shocked. The girl was sure that she had indeed stabbed the dagger into Wu Ming's body. Even if it was a specter, after being hit by her attack, it should be dead. Then, the girl in black used the technique of getting close to Wu Ming again. In an instant, she and Wu Ming were separated by a considerable distance. She did not even want to stab the dagger into Wu Ming's body. It looked like a teleportation, but Wu Ming, who had a little experience in space, could tell that it was not teleportation. "Is your technique controlling distance?" Wu Ming asked casually. "Who the hell are you?" The girl in black was shocked. While she said vigilantly, the girl took out a dagger to defend herself. She already had the idea of retreating. "After all, I'm not an ordinary specter." Wu Ming calmly pulled out the dagger that was inserted into his body. After pulling out the dagger, only a hole was left on his clothes. Wu Ming's body did not have any major injuries. It could be said that he was unscathed. Playing with the dagger in his hand, Wu Ming looked at the girl in black. "Compared to these unimportant matters, I'm more interested in your background, Miss Man in Black." Wu Ming smiled slightly, and then began to chant. "Fear the one with wings. Evil people and powerful people are all afraid of me with wings. My wings will bring you curses. Evil people can't hit me." When Wu Ming was chanting, he released a trace of his aura, which made the black-clothed girl freeze. It was as if she had met an acquaintance. However, the girl also knew that what Wu Ming was chanting was not something good, so she quickly reacted. However, although Wu Ming seemed to be chanting slowly, his speed was actually very fast. By the time the girl in black reacted, Wu Ming had already finished chanting. In other words, the girl lost the chance to escape. In an instant, Wu Ming's entire person vanished. The next moment, as if it was ironic, Wu Ming's figure appeared in front of the girl in black just like how the girl approached Wu Ming. He tightly stuck to the girl's body as if he was throwing himself into her arms. Wu Ming also lifted the girl's black cloak while he was at it. What entered Wu Ming's eyes was a petite girl with long black hair wearing a sleeveless dress and a short jacket tied around her waist. "I didn't expect the girl to look so good," Wu Ming said teasingly. "But don't think too much about it." The reason why Wu Ming used the phoenix incarnation to stick to the girl's body was because Wu Ming wanted an eye for an eye. After all, no one would be happy to be stabbed in the back all of a sudden. This was also the reason why the girl did not move when Wu Ming was so close to her and was teased by Wu Ming. The girl was stabbed in the back by Wu Ming. Ugh! The girl covered her abdomen and staggered back 2 steps. However, just when the girl thought that she could rely on distance control to retreat, she found that her ability did not work. What's going on? My ability doesn't work. The temporary failure of her ability, coupled with the injury on her abdomen, made the girl cry out. Her legs went soft and she almost knelt on the ground. However, Wu Ming hugged the girl's body in time. "Your ability is distance control, right? I have used a sealing technique to temporarily seal your ability." "Seal? Seal?" The girl was shocked. There were many silencing skills in Yggdrasil, World Tree, which were skills that existed to prevent the enemy from using their skills. Wu Ming naturally learned 1 or 2 of such a convenient skill. He was no longer constrained by the game system. The silencing skill he used had reached a duration of half an hour. In other words, if the girl only had the ability to control distance, then she was doomed today. Of course, it did not mean that Wu Ming's silencing skill could silence the opponent 100% of the time. It still depended on the strength of the enemy. Just like White Wuxia, Wu Ming estimated that the silencing skill could only work for less than a second. However, for the girl who was smart, half an hour of silence was already good enough. "Then, can you tell me who your master is, the girl who has become my captive?" Chapter 596. Just like that, the girl's abdomen was bleeding while Wu Ming held her in his arms and questioned her in an unnegotiable tone. If the girl's wound was removed, this scene would look like a beautiful scene of a young boy and a young girl hugging each other. However, Wu Ming was not the kind of person who would be blinded by his enemy's lust, and the girl would not fall in love with a guy who stabbed her and questioned her at the moment. The result was that they could not come to an agreement. I won't say anything. Don't think of getting any information from me. The girl glared fiercely at Wu Ming. The girl had already admitted defeat. The reason why she was sent to negotiate with Luos was because she was smart and had the ability to retreat easily. If one had to say something, the girl was actually very weak. However, this way, Wu Ming could completely suspect whether there were companions who were secretly protecting her or communicating with her. It doesn't matter if you don't say anything. I think you're not the only one around. There should be companions or something like that. At this moment, an object suddenly charged towards Wu Ming's position. However, Wu Ming did not panic in the face of this attack. For Wu Ming, who had already activated the Phoenix transformation and entered the Seraphic Speed world, such an attack was completely dodged. However, Wu Ming did not want to dodge. I am the strongest and the one who holds all victory in my hands. No matter if it's a human or a demon, I am the one who defeats all enemies. I will defeat any enemy that stands in my way. Giant with supreme divine power. Give me your assistance. In just a moment, Wu Ming deactivated the Phoenix transformation and activated the giant transformation. In an instant, a golden giant shadow appeared behind Wu Ming. However, the giant shadow exuded a powerful aura that would not make people think that the giant was really virtual. Following Wu Ming's consciousness, the giant raised its fist and swung it at the incoming object. Boom! With a loud boom, the giant's fist collided with the unknown object. The unknown object was like a baseball that was sent flying by Wu Ming's giant bat. However, the force of the collision created a strong storm that instantly spread to the surroundings. The storm swept through the surrounding forest. Trees that were very close to the epicenter of the storm were directly blown down. The surrounding trees were almost parallel to the ground. The wind swept Wu Ming, causing his clothes to flutter. However, Wu Ming himself remained motionless in the wind. On the other hand, the girl in Wu Ming's arms was almost blown away by this astonishing storm, and she even let out a pitiful cry. If it wasn't for Wu Ming's arm for the girl to hug, the girl would have already flown out. If the girl, who had temporarily lost her ability, was blown away, she would either die or be seriously injured. After all, the girl's body was not that strong. The storm slowly came to a stop, and Wu Ming saw the face of the thing that attacked him. It was a pitch-black griffin with some dragon characteristics. Just now, this griffin wanted to use its hard body to collide with Wu Ming, but it was hammered away by Wu Ming's giant form. The griffin stopped in the sky and shook its head that was hammered by Wu Ming's giant form. The griffin looked in the direction of Wu Ming and the girl, or rather, directly at Wu Ming. The griffin was not stupid. It could still see that the giant's shadow was controlled by Wu Ming. Are you okay? The girl, who had calmed down, asked the griffin in the sky worriedly. Wu Ming glanced at the girl. Her initial hesitation was obviously because she swallowed the griffin's name that was about to come out of her mouth. He had to admit that the girl's method was quite good. She really didn't give any information. I'm fine. The griffin shook its head, then flew down and landed in front of Wu Ming not far away. Your Excellency, I apologize on her behalf for her previous offensive behavior. There is no need for us to be enemies. The griffin began to negotiate with Wu Ming. However, the griffin's words made Wu Ming laugh. Oh, you two are indeed in the same group. Even your actions are the same. The girl also made the first move. When she realized that she couldn't win, she was prepared to escape. In the end, she was captured by Wu Ming. The griffin also made the first move, but it was beaten back by Wu Ming's giant with a punch. Only then did they begin to negotiate. If I didn't have some tricks up my sleeve, I'm afraid that I would have died here today. Wu Ming mocked the girl and the griffin. It was really as Wu Ming had said. Their behavior was indeed somewhat immoral. The young girl's face blushed a little. However, the griffin was an existence that appeared to be more mature than the girl. It did not feel ashamed of Wu Ming's words. Even Boxland, which uses the gift competition as its main means of survival of the fittest, has to make do with the law of the jungle. Not to mention, this is World's End, which is no longer part of Boxland City, the Griffin said calmly. Indeed, no matter where one was, in order to survive and negotiate with others, one needed strength. If Wuming was weak, then sorry, but Wuming was not qualified to negotiate with them. Thus, if Wuming was weak, then he would either die to the girl's dagger or die to the Griffin and become its dinner. However, Wuming was very strong. He was so strong that he could capture the girl and beat back the Griffin with a punch. With that, Wuming was qualified to negotiate with them. You're right. I agree with what you said, so I can't blame you. Wuming shrugged. Wuming also believed in the principle of respecting the strong, which coincided with the Griffins. However, when the Griffin thought that it saw an opportunity to negotiate, Wuming's next move made it uneasy. Be afraid of those with wings. Evil people and strong people are afraid of me with wings. My wings will bring you curses. Evil people can't hit me. Wuming chanted the language spirit at an extremely fast speed. The girl closest to Wuming heard this familiar language spirit and immediately shouted at the Griffin. Be careful, this language spirit has an ability similar to mine. When the Griffin heard this, it immediately spread its wings and flew into the sky. However, for Wuming, who had entered the state of lightning speed, the Griffin's speed was too slow. In an instant, Wuming, who was carrying the girl, jumped fiercely, and Wuming disappeared along with the golden giant's shadow. Be careful. Suddenly, the Griffin heard the girl's voice above its head. The Griffin subconsciously raised its head and saw a huge golden fist. Boom! A dull sound came from the forest. It was a pity that the surrounding birds had either died or fled in the first round of the storm. Otherwise, they might be able to see a scene of birds flying together. Looking at the Griffin pressed to the ground by the golden giant's shadow, Wuming smiled. Then we can negotiate now. Chapter 597. The Griffin was pressed to the ground by Wuming's golden giant shadow. No matter how hard the Griffin flapped its wings, it couldn't get rid of the giant suppression. This was because when Wuming used the giant shadow to press down on the Griffin, he also silenced it. However, the effect wasn't great because this Griffin relied on its own physical strength. Don't waste your energy. I think negotiating with me is your only way, unless you have other companions with special abilities. Wuming smiled at the Griffin under his feet. Although Wuming was in his spiritual form at this moment, his abilities were basically the same as his main body. In other words, Wuming could use multiple avatars. It could be said that if it weren't for Wuming wanting to have fun with the Griffin, Wuming would have killed it with a sure kill. But after all, the main thing now was to gather information. Moreover, Wuming wasn't a demon who liked to kill, so he wouldn't directly end the Griffin's life. You're a powerhouse. I have to admit that. However, the Griffin didn't give in just because it was subdued. It just generously admitted that it was inferior to Road. I'm indeed no match for you. This time it's my loss. Although Wuming liked tough guys like the Griffin, it was still very annoying when the enemy didn't give in after being subdued. I don't hate guys like you, but if you lose, you have to admit it. I don't want to fight. Tell me honestly what information you have. With that, Wuming stretched out his hand and placed it on the girl's stomach. Wah! Stinky rogue, what are you doing? The girl in Wuming's hand instantly changed. She didn't care that her bleeding body hadn't stopped and desperately tried to stop the rogue in front of her from attacking her. Wuming sighed. Then, he half-curled his fist and pointed his index finger at the girl's head. Bang! Wah! The girl held her head in pain and kicked wildly in the air while shouting. Don't think too much. I just want to show my sincerity and treat you. After saying that, Wuming placed his hand on the girl's injured stomach. Then, Wuming suddenly pulled. Ah, it hurts, it hurts. The girl instantly moved her hand from her head to her stomach. Because Wuming had pulled out the dagger from her abdomen, the wound that had started to stop bleeding started to bleed profusely again. She was in so much pain that she felt like she was hovering between life and death, she thought. This caused the Griffin under Wuming's feet, which was controlled by the golden giant's phantom, to frown. Its body, which had just stabilized, began to struggle again. I protest. This is blatant torture. The young girl looked at Wuming with tears in her eyes, looking as if she had been greatly wronged. Both the girl and the Griffin began to suspect that Wuming was just bluffing when he said that he would treat her as a show of sincerity. This made Wu-ming feel rather helpless. He didn't know who started it first, but this was called reaping the consequences of one's own actions. Just treat it as a punishment. Ignoring the griffin's struggle and the girl's resistance, Wu-ming carried the girl with one hand and casually threw the dagger with the other. The dagger was firmly controlled in the air by Wu-ming's mental strength. Then, Wu-ming lifted the girl's head again, making the girl move her hand to her head. Wu-ming put his hand on the girl's bleeding stomach again. Then, the girl felt a warm current on her stomach. Wu-ming was using the life recovery magic to treat the girl. At the same time, the pain on her stomach was slowly disappearing, which made the girl feel as if she was soaking in a hot spring. The result of this was naturally the girl making a strange sound. The girl quickly covered her mouth, blushing and not daring to look at Wu-ming. This made Wu-ming laugh. Is it that comfortable? Wu-ming looked at the girl teasingly. This made the girl's blushing face even redder. The griffin under Wu-ming's feet pretended not to see this. After seeing that Wu-ming was really treating the girl, it stopped struggling. All right, it shouldn't hurt anymore. Wu-ming removed his hand from the girl's stomach. Through the hole in her dress, the girl's smooth skin on her stomach was exposed. Thank you. The good upbringing made the girl blush as she thanked Wu-ming. But the girl forgot that it was the guy she thanked who stabbed her. Then, Wu-ming teased the girl back. The feeling on your stomach is not bad. Wu-ming's teasing made the girl realize that the guy in front of her was an enemy. She also remembered that she was injured because of this guy. But the girl forgot that the guy stabbed her because she stabbed him first, although she did not cause any damage. The girl stared at Wu-ming as if she was acting shamelessly and did not speak. And Wu-ming was not angry. Instead, he looked at the griffin under his feet. Kid, my name is Glea Graves. Left with no choice, the griffin could only speak first. Elder Gu? After the griffin spoke, the girl shouted in surprise. It was as if she did not understand why the griffin would compromise. Elders make me feel more at ease, although I am still not satisfied with this. After all, Wu-ming would rather not know the name than know other information. Humph. Even if Elder Gu spoke, I will not tell you any information. For the sake of Her Highness, you should give up. The girl turned her head and no longer looked at Wu-ming. Not bad, young lady. Wu-ming had a whole new level of respect for the young lady's courage. In that case, don't blame me for being ruthless. Wu-ming turned the girl's face with his hand and smiled at her. What do you want to do? Looking at this extremely scary smile, the girl wanted to step back in horror, but she found that she was still in Wu-ming's hands. Suddenly, Glea Graves spoke. Don't go too far, kid. Glea raised his head slightly and looked at Wu-ming with sharp eyes. However, Wu-ming laughed. That's funny, Griffin. Wu-ming did not call the griffin by his name, but called him by his creature's name. Although I was indeed interested in you guys who wanted to buy Letitia, you guys made the first move from the beginning. I was just passively counterattacking. Then, Wu-ming closed his eyes and opened them again. His originally red pupils instantly turned into golden vertical pupils. Endless pressure emanated from Wu-ming's body. Or is it because my easygoing nature made you guys think that I'm easy to provoke? Do you have to wait until I'm serious before you guys tell me the truth? Sensing Wu-ming's terrifying aura, Glea and the girl froze. You are. Glea's reaction made Wu-ming narrow his eyes. This reaction was the same as the girl's reaction when she sensed his aura. In other words, these two people knew him. At the very least, they were familiar with his aura. This made Wu-ming laugh. In this case, these two people might have seen his original body, or their organization might have information about his original body. According to the worst-case scenario, Wu-ming's original body might have been stolen by them. At this moment, there was a riot in the surrounding forest. Rumble. Chapter 598. Feeling the tremors from the ground, Wu-ming could not help but look in a certain direction. Wu-ming could sense that something was running over from the direction he was looking at. Did your companions come to save you? However, the two of them did not answer Wu-ming's question. Not bad. You chose not to speak because someone is here to save you? Wu-ming smiled. Then, have you ever thought that I might directly kill your companions who came to save you? Ming's words did not shake the two of them as if the person who came was not their partner. In other words, the two of them thought that Ming could not kill the person who came. At that moment, the creatures that caused the tremors appeared. More than 10 white dragon lizards that looked like lizards but were a few times larger than an ordinary person charged at Ming. Ming could sense that these large lizards were very powerful. They were at least in the 5 digits. However, even so, Ming was not afraid. Then, Ming began chanting a new spirit language. All evildoers, be afraid of my power. Now, I'll have the majesty of 10 mountains, the power of 100 rivers, and the strength of 1,000 giant dragons. The majestic me will raise the ferocious mark of a dragon. Ming finished chanting the spirit language at a speed that seemed slow but was actually very fast. In an instant, the golden giant shadow behind Ming began to change. Initially, the giant shadow behind Ming was just an ordinary golden giant. However, after Ming finished chanting the spirit language, the golden giant began to grow into the characteristics of a dragon. Dragon horns, dragon claws, dragon whiskers, dragon tail, and everything that was related to a dragon grew on the golden giant shadow. In an instant, the golden giant shadow turned into a golden dragonoid shadow. The pressure that the dragonoid shadow exuded shocked Gria and the girl. At that moment, it was as if a pure-blood dragon had appeared in front of them. This is the combination of Ming's giant avatar and my dragon-type avatar. A dragonoid with the ability to kill dragons combined with a tall and strong giant would result in a dragonoid. In the next moment, under Ming's control, the golden dragon man raised its fist high and smashed it down viciously at the oncoming white dragon lizards. Boom! The white dragon lizard was easily annihilated. A violent shockwave reverberated throughout World's End. This time, however, the attack from the giant silhouette, which had condensed its power, did not cause a tempest. However, it did cause a lot of dust. Abruptly sweeping away the dust around him, Ming looked at Gria and the girl who were originally beside him but had now disappeared and frowned slightly. Ming had just sensed that someone had teleported Gria and the girl away while he was controlling the golden dragonoid to attack the white dragon lizards. Shortly after, Ming turned to the side and saw a gentlemanly man with elegant light brown hair standing behind him. It seems like you're rather powerful to be able to seize the opportunity to rescue them from under my nose. Ming gazed at the man. I can't help it. Even though I'm not completely on their side, I'm still considered their companion, after all. I have to rescue them if I can. The man smiled at Ming gracefully. But in Ming's opinion, he was rather arrogant. Be afraid of those with wings. Evil people and powerful people are afraid of me with wings. My wings will bring you curses. Evil people can't hit me. Ming glared with his golden vertical pupils and finished his thought. In an instant, the powers of the 3 avatars, Giant, Dragon, and Phoenix, burst forth at the same time. Ming vanished in an instant, bringing along the golden dragonoid shadow. Then, a huge golden fist with 10,000 tons of power instantly smashed the man into the ground. This time, Ming didn't hold back like he did with the girl and Gria. The punch he threw at the man was a full-force blow. The dragonoid shadow slowly raised its fist, and specks of blue particles disappeared with the wind. Ming was certain that the blue particles belonged to the man just now. Now, he had been reduced to ashes. However, Ming could be said to have failed this time. Oh my, you're really powerful. The man's voice came from behind Ming. Ming's eyes showed some confusion. Then, Ming turned around unhurriedly. He had to admit that this was really bold. Ming was not afraid of the enemy sneaking up on him. Hence, Ming turned around slowly. The enemy was also in a hurry to attack and chose to wait for Ming to turn around slowly. Ming turned around. In the end, the man who should have been smashed to pieces really reappeared here. Moreover, he was behind Ming. Now, Ming understood why Gria and the girl weren't worried about the newcomer at all. It seemed like this thing couldn't be killed. Can't be killed. Ming began to guess the other party's ability. Thank you for taking care of that attack just now. My name is Maxwell. The man, or rather, Maxwell bowed to Ming and did not attack. You're not attacking? Ming asked casually. Maxwell shook his head. I know my own abilities. Even if you're only a soul now, you're not someone in existence like me can offend. Maxwell shook his head elegantly. However, through this sentence, Ming learned a lot of things. My mission has been completed. Then, I'll take my leave first. See you next time, powerful dragon species. In an instant, Maxwell's figure disappeared. However, the moment he disappeared, Wuming noticed a slight change in the space. It doesn't seem like a space shift. Wuming pondered. He had to admit that the box court was really an interesting place. The teleportation that he encountered was basically not a simple space shift. Moreover, through the various actions and words of this wave of people just now, Wuming could tell. The other party seemed to know about his own main body. Wuming guessed that either the other party was related to the demon lord who had attacked No Name, or the other party was the demon lord who had attacked No Name. However, there was still too little information. Wuming's inference was only an analysis of his own main body. If only there was more information. TSK, I should have directly captured the griffin and the girl before. However, this time when he came out to meet with the other party, he did not have the mentality of being able to obtain any information. In the end, he got some information about his main body. He shook his head and stopped thinking about these messy things. Canceling the transformation state, Wuming waved one hand and a dark space door appeared in front of Wuming. 16 knights should have won. It seems that I have to prepare a little. With that, Wuming entered the portal and disappeared, leaving behind a mess. Chapter 599. On a sunny afternoon, the lower level of the eastern district of Boxting presented a warm and peaceful scene. In the Thousand Eyes branch, White Yaksha closed his eyes and slowly tasted the tea leaves in his teacup, enjoying the peace that was hard to come by. Suddenly, a purplish-black dimensional portal appeared before White Yaksha like a black hole. White Yaksha opened his eyes slightly and looked at the ripple that was like a black hole with interest. Then, when he sensed that someone was coming out, White Yaksha held his teacup with one hand and waved his free hand at the dimensional portal. A seemingly ordinary but powerful energy bomb was launched at the black hole. As a result, Wuming, who had just come out of the dimensional portal, was hit in the face by the energy bomb. Master White Yaksha, do I have a grudge against you? Wuming grabbed the energy bomb that was about to explode but could not as it was suppressed by Wuming. He looked at White Yaksha helplessly. Oh, isn't this Villo? I didn't expect this to be your trick. Bai Yaksha took his time and calmly took a sip of tea. Later on, White Yaksha looked at Wuming. It seems like you're not in a good mood. Wuming sighed when he heard what White Yaksha said. He had just stepped out of the dimensional portal and was hit in the face by an energy bomb. No matter who it was, they would not be in a good mood. If you're in a good mood, it's just that I've encountered something. Later on, Wuming thought of something and sat down next to White Yaksha. Speaking of which, Letitia's gift competition should be over. What's the result? As he asked White Yaksha, golden ripples appeared in the air around Wuming. A luxurious crystal bottle flew out from Wuming's relic space. Later on, Wuming snapped his fingers and created a crystal cup with his create green item skill. Through his telekinesis, he controlled the crystal bottle and the crystal bottle in the air poured wine into the cup in Wuming's hand. Just like that, Wuming began to drink by himself. Looking at the crystal bottle floating beside Wuming and smelling the fragrance of the wine in Wuming's hand, White Yaksha put down the teacup in his hand. Isn't the result obvious? No Name won. At the same time, 16th Knights and Ren gained some prestige. White Yaksha was there to watch No Name's match. 16 Knights had won beautifully, and No Name was in the limelight. Is that so? 16 Knights is quite fast. Wuming downed the wine in his cup in one gulp. Noticing that White Yaksha's attention was on his wine, Wuming smiled in relief. Do you want some? This is a good wine that I plundered from Perseus. Wuming said as he shook the bottle in his hand. Needless to say, Luos really knew how to enjoy himself. He spent a lot of his community's voluntary exchange and could afford to be luxurious for once. This bottle of wine that was over 10,000 years old was one of Luos's luxurious items. You really know how to do this kind of business. As a witness to the gift competition between Luos and Wuming, White Yaksha naturally knew that Perseus became Wuming's possession. Then, Wuming casually taking things from Perseus was naturally legal. But I like it. White Yaksha showed a well-done smile. Ming snapped his fingers and another similar crystal cup appeared in the air. The crystal bottle automatically tilted and the wine in the bottle poured into the crystal cup. After it was full, the crystal cup floated in front of White Yaksha. White Yaksha took the wine and downed it in one gulp and made a sound of satisfaction. Huh. It's really good wine. Another cup. The crystal bottle automatically poured wine for White Yaksha and Ming. Like old drinking buddies, the two of them drank together. Then, why did you come to me since you already guessed the result? White Yaksha's face was slightly red as he narrowed his eyes, giving off the feeling of being drunk. Ming downed the wine in his cup in one gulp and looked at White Yaksha without hesitation. Actually, I'm here to ask you about the godhood, Garen said. Oh, godhood. White Yaksha's eyes lit up. After all, I'm not from this world. I don't know much about godhood, so I wanted to ask you who can bestow godhood to others. After all, there was no such thing as godhood in Ming's power system. Among the people he knew, White Yaksha was the only one who had a good relationship with him and could bestow godhood to others. If I'm not wrong, you want to know about godhood because of Letitia, right? White Yaksha was not in a hurry to answer Ming's question. He took his time to sip his wine. That's right. Ming nodded. He was not surprised that White Yaksha had guessed his thoughts. Ming had no intention of hiding it, and White Yaksha was a smart person. Hence, it was normal for him to be able to guess it. Letitia's strength had become so weak because she had handed over her godhood. She had once said that her strength was not even 1/10 of her original strength. Hence, Ming wanted to ask if there was any alternative method. I have to say, kid, you've asked the right person. White Yaksha immediately took out his folding fan and proudly covered the lower half of his face. You should know that I'm in the top 10 of the boxers. I've also had a lot of experience in bestowing godhood. This surprised Ming. Although Ming could see that White Yaksha was extraordinary, Ming did not expect White Yaksha to be in the top 10. However, why did he suddenly feel that the boxer's combat strength was very low? As if he could see Ming's speechless ridicule, White Yaksha knocked on Ming with his folding fan. Kid, don't be so careless. You should know that your strength is very strong. Even I'm not confident that I can defeat you. Hearing White Yaksha's words, Ming felt relieved. The origin dragon's strength increased with age. If Ming had stayed in the origin and never left, even if he did not have the Savior Divine Blade, the 12 incarnations, and did not have magic or Lune, Ming could look down on all things with just his origin dragon's physical body. In other words, when the origin dragon was fully grown, it would be a huge dragon with high HP, high defense and strong attack. No one could break its defense, invincible physical body. No one could indirectly, curse, seal, etc., harm it. No one could escape its pursuit, free travel between worlds. And no one could block its attacks. Powerhouses did not have any fancy abilities. It was just a casual attack. As a young origin dragon, Ming had mastered many techniques. Through the enhancement of his race's strength, even in this boxer's world with many powerhouses, he could dominate an area. Moreover, it was the kind that no one could control. However, then I'm sorry. Actually, I don't know my own limits. Chapter 600. Ming shrugged his shoulders jokingly, which made White Yaksha very unhappy. White Yaksha wanted to tell Ming that he was very strong, but Ming was like an ordinary person who had won $5 million and saved it in the bank, continuing to live an ordinary life. However, White Yaksha thought about it and did not fly into a rage. Well, as the star spirit of the sun, I'm the same as you. White Yaksha was the materialization of the heaven-shaking spiritual lattice. He was originally a demon king born as an unaffiliated human in the final trial. Due to the development of technology, the heaven-shaking spiritual lattice was outlawed, and the danger of White Yaksha as a human in the final trial was indirectly eliminated. However, the powerful White Yaksha was still very powerful. It did not mean that White Yaksha was crippled without the heaven-shaking spiritual lattice. That was because White Yaksha was the star spirit of the sun. As a sun that existed longer than humans, White Yaksha could not be weak no matter how one thought about it. In addition, White Yaksha was not a cruel person at heart. Therefore, White Yaksha accepted the Yaksha godhood of Buddhism, lowered his spiritual lattice, and came to the lower class of the box court world to be the ruler of the class. However, if one were to look at the whole story, White Yaksha and Ming were really the same kind of people. They were experts who appeared out of thin air. They were not strong in the early stages but were basically invincible in the later stages. Not to mention, you have the power of the sun in your body. It's completely possible for someone to say that we are relatives. White Yaksha was referring to Wu Ming's sun incarnation. Then my relative, Lord White Yaksha, do you have any thoughts about Letitia losing her godhood? Wu Ming directly hit the nail on the head and began to claim kinship with White Yaksha in a joking manner. Regarding Letitia, I don't have a choice. White Yaksha shook his head. Although godhood seemed to be mass-produced, there are many drawbacks. White Yaksha began to explain to Wu Ming. Letitia's godhood is exclusive to her. It was bestowed by the expert who created the vampires. The expert who created the vampires? Wu Ming asked in confusion. White Yaksha was deeply gratified by Wu Ming's ignorance. I'm afraid you don't know that Letitia's race was created by the dragon who carried the world. Carrying the world dragon. The name sounded grand, almost comparable to his own, origin dragon. I'm not too sure about the specifics. All you need to know is that it's a dragon with a world on its back, White Yaksha told Wu Ming simply. Letitia's vampire clan was created by that guy, and Letitia's divinity was also given by him. Then, White Yaksha explained the godhead to Wu Ming in detail. Different gods and Buddhas bestowed different godhoods. For example, the godhoods bestowed by 2-digit godhoods were much stronger than those bestowed by 5-digit godhoods. What if White Yaksha bestowed Letitia with a new godhood? Wu Ming asked. After all, Wu Ming wanted Letitia to recover her previous strength. Since that was the case, wouldn't it be better to have the White Yakshas bestow divinity to Letitia? You're dreaming, kid. White Yaksha attacked Wu Ming mercilessly. Let's not talk about the fact that my strength has been suppressed. It won't be that easy to bestow a divinity to Letitia. Besides, if I bestow a divinity to Letitia, then she will belong to Thous and yes. That's really fine. After all, to be able to recover Letitia's previous strength, she would need someone like White Yaksha. If White Yaksha bestowed a godhood, she would become a dependent. Just like the big snake at the end of the world, it was White Yaksha's dependent. I'm just asking. I've never thought of asking you to bestow Letitia with a godhood. After all, Wu Ming also had the ability to bestow power to others. Speaking of which, don't you have the ability to bestow power to others? White Yaksha asked, puzzled. Logically speaking, someone at Wu Ming's level should also have the means to bestow power to others. Cough. Yes, there is. It's just that the process wasn't very friendly. Wu Ming smiled awkwardly. Wu Ming's magician incarnation, formerly one of Wellislana's 10 incarnations, the youth incarnation, could bestow power to others. However, it could only bestow power to humans. Letitia, a vampire, probably could not. Wu Ming's current magician incarnation also had the ability to bestow protection to others. White Princess Alice had been bestowed protection by Wu Ming more than once. However, only mouth-to-mouth was the most effective and fastest way. However, the power instilled in this way would eventually be exhausted. In other words, if the power was exhausted, he would have to go through the embarrassing process again. Although Letitia had once wanted to give herself to Wu Ming because of a misunderstanding, it was still a misunderstanding. This method was not very friendly to the current Letitia. However, other than that, Wu Ming had another method. One of the 12 incarnations, the dependent incarnation. Wu Ming had wanted to use this method from the very beginning, but it was slightly unfair to Letitia. After all, if she accepted Wu Ming's contract and became his dependent, she would truly become one of Wu Ming's people. Just like the Skywing species. What Wu Ming hoped for was for Letitia to become the guardian of no name, not his own dependent. That was why Wu Ming had asked White Yaksha about the godhood. Forget it. I'll go back and discuss it with Letitia. Wu Ming rubbed his brow as he felt a headache coming on. Oh, you have an idea. White Yaksha held the wine glass and took another sip. You can say that. As Wu Ming said that, he used his telekinesis to control the crystal wine bottle and poured himself another glass of wine before downing it in one gulp. Thank you for telling me so much, White Yaksha. Then, I'll take my leave. With that said, Wu Ming did not stand on ceremony. He crushed the wine glass he had created using the Create Green item and let it dissipate into magic particles in the air. After that, Wu-ming stood up and opened the portal to No Name. The moment before he entered, Wu-ming turned to look at White Yuxia. White Yuxia, there's still quite a bit of wine left in that bottle. I'll give it to you. Oh! Then, I won't stand on ceremony. White Yuxia did not hesitate to grab the crystal bottle in the air. Thank you again for your help, White Yuxia. With that said, Wu-ming entered the portal and left the branch of No Name. There's nothing to thank. Just treat it as me making up for my hesitation 3 years ago. No Name Base, Conference Room. Welcome back, Senior Letitia. The black rabbit hugged Letitia happily and rubbed against the ground. The return of his former companions really made Black Rabbit quite happy. However, Jiuo Asaka and Haruhi Byari looked at the fat on the chest of the black rabbit that had buried Letitia's head, and then looked at their own chests. Black Rabbit, your extra meat is really too much of a hindrance. He needs to be punished. After the two of them finished speaking, they grabbed the black rabbit's ears. Ah, why are you treating the black rabbit like this? Looking at Kyugu Asaka and Haruhi Byayoi, Letitia smiled gratefully. It could be considered that they had saved her from suffocating to death. Welcome back, Letitia. Ren stepped forward and congratulated Letitia on her return. Thanks for your hard work, Ren, Letitia said to Ren apologetically. Then, Letitia looked around. Speaking of which, where did Sir Villo go? That guy. Maybe he went to have fun by himself. 16 Knights, who was casually sitting on the sofa, waved his hand. At this time, Wu-ming's voice was heard. Your words really hurt me, Shikuni-kun. Chapter 601. A purplish-black portal suddenly appeared beside 16 Knights, and Wu-ming walked out of it. Villo-sama. Letitia looked at Wu-ming gratefully and bowed. Thank you for everything you've done for me. Wu-ming walked in front of Letitia and rubbed her head. I didn't do anything. If you want to thank someone, thank 16 Knights. Your return depended on him. Hey bro, are you making fun of me? Hearing Wu-ming's words, 16 Knights suddenly shouted in a bad mood. Although I have other ways, I've only contributed a little in this matter. Let's just go through the motions. After all, if it wasn't for Wu-ming, then Luo's definitely wouldn't have started the gift competition. And even without 16 Knights, there was still Xiaofan and Kasuga Hiroyuki to win the gift competition, not to mention that Wu-ming himself could participate. What credit, if it's mine, no one can take it away. But if it's not mine, then I definitely won't take it away. 16 Knights' evil aesthetic was fully exposed. By the way, since Villo-sama already took Perseus, why not just transfer me to No Name? Why do you still want to have a gift competition? Letitia complained. This was simply Wu-ming giving his own things as a prize for the gift competition that his community participated in. It was very strange in itself. However, Wu-ming shook his head at Letitia's complaint. It's not the same, Letitia. Although Wu-ming was also a member of No Name, donating his own things to the community felt like giving alms. Although Letitia might become Wu-ming's possession again. Moreover, the limelight had been stolen by Wu-ming alone this time. No matter what, they had to give the others a chance to perform. Although Xiaofan and Kasuga Hiroyuki still didn't appear. And the most important thing was, we still have to rely on this gift competition to establish our prestige, blonde lowly, 16 Knights said rudely to Letitia. Only then did Letitia remember that she had ruined No Name's plan to build up its reputation. I'm really sorry, everyone. Letitia bowed to everyone guiltily. Then, Wu-ming flicked her head. But it's fine as long as the result is good. Wu-ming smiled as he looked at Letitia, who was crouching down with tears in her eyes due to the pain in her head. Although he knew that Letitia might be a few hundred years old, she was still a cute creature. Speaking of which, what happened to the plan? Wu-ming looked at Ren. This time, Mr. 16 Knights performed very well. Coincidentally, he also met the subordinates of the high-level Demon King in the gift competition. He successfully made a name for himself. At this moment, Ren acted like a leader and was quite calm. All in all, the plan was a great success. Hee hee. 16th Knights raised his arm to show his victory. Well, it's fine as long as the plan is completed. Wu-ming shrugged his shoulders. Actually, Wu-ming didn't know what the gift competition was about. Wu-ming only told Luos to play according to the original game. But even so, Wu-ming still dared to let 16th Knights participate in the gift competition. This was the so-called trust. Wu-ming believed that 16th Knights could win, and 16th Knights didn't disappoint Wu-ming. Not to mention, 16th Knights also met the subordinates of the high-level Demon King in the box court, which really made No Name famous. However, since there were high-level people participating in the gift competition, it seemed like Letitia's identity wasn't ordinary. Wu-ming looked at Letitia, who was still rubbing her forehead with tears in her eyes, and was once again struck by her cuteness. Shaking his head, Wu-ming threw the question of Letitia's identity to the back of his mind and started the main topic. I just went to Byakuya's place to ask about some things. Wu-ming's expression began to become serious, which made Komodo Asaka and Haruai Hiroyuki stop teasing Black Rabbit and become serious. Now, Letitia, I'll give you 3 choices. Wu-ming looked at Letitia. First, become my dependent, and share my honor and disgrace, but the price is to become my person. Second, accept my blessing, but the price is to receive another blessing every once in a while, and the process may be very cruel for you. Third, don't accept the above 2 proposals, give up becoming my dependent, and give up receiving my blessing. Wu-ming briefly finished the 3 choices. Although it was brief, it was easy to understand, and there was no one present who didn't understand. But Letitia was puzzled. But Villo, Sama, didn't you say that after I return to No Name, you will let me accept your power and become the guardian of No Name? This seemed to be different from what he said at the beginning. Of course, it wasn't that Letitia was calculative, but she was puzzled by the 3rd choice Wu-ming gave her. If the first and second choices were to choose the way to obtain power, then the 3rd choice was to let Letitia give up. Letitia didn't understand Wu-ming's intention. After Letitia asked this question, the scene fell into silence. Because of this silent atmosphere, even Black Rabbit didn't dare to rub her rabbit ears. After a moment, Wu-ming sighed. It's actually like this, Letitia. Then, Wu-ming told Letitia the reason. In other words, you can't find a way for me to recover my strength and obtain godhood for the time being, but you don't want me to bear your shackles, so you gave me 3 choices? Letitia concluded Wu-ming's words. But, Letitia smiled. You're really gentle, Mr. Villo. Gentle? Gentle? Wu-ming was surprised. He didn't think he was gentle. Wu-ming just didn't want Letitia to sell him to Wu-ming without knowing why. But it seemed to be a little gentle. Cough cough. In short, you can choose the 3rd choice, but you don't have to worry. I will see if I can help you find your godhood in the future and restore your strength. But Letitia directly rejected. No need, Mr. Villo. Then, Letitia looked firmly at Wu-ming's eyes that were the same color as hers. I choose the 1st choice. Become my dependent. But you have to know, if you become my dependent, there is a high possibility that there is no way to remove it. At least Wu-ming tried to see if he could remove it. Then, Mr. Wu-ming, if I become your dependent, I won't be able to stay in No Name? Of course not. The disadvantage is that you will be branded with my mark and share my life. It won't affect you in any other way. Wu-ming shook his head. Then, Wu-ming looked at Ran, Black Rabbit, and the others. What about you guys? Don't you object to Letitia's decision? But they all shook their heads in response to Wu-ming. Even if we are companions, we will respect Letitia Senpai's choice. Black Rabbit looked indignant. Black Rabbit is right. Our companions chose the right path. We have no right to stop them. Ren added. I didn't do anything this time. I won't say anything. Jiu Yuanfei crossed her arms and sat on the sofa. Same. Haruai Toshi nodded and sat down with Jiu Yuanfei. Finally, Wu-ming looked at 16th Knights. Hey, what are you looking at me for? I don't care about such troublesome things. 16th Knights had a, whatever you want, look. After sighing, Wu-ming finally looked at Letitia. Letitia, you might not understand the importance of becoming my dependent. Come here. Wu-ming gestured at Letitia. Letitia obediently walked over. Then, Wu-ming squatted down and pressed his forehead against Letitia's. Instantly, Wu-ming passed the description of dependentness ability to Letitia. After a moment, Wu-ming stood up and looked at Letitia again. I see. Is that what Villo Senpai meant? Letitia nodded thoughtfully. Then, do you still have the option to continue, Letitia? But Letitia smiled. Yes. Looking around at everyone, then looking at Letitia, Wu-ming sighed. If that's the case, then so be it. Wu-ming squatted down again and smiled at Letitia. It's too late to regret, my dependent. But Letitia smiled back. Yes, my master. Chapter 602. There wasn't much fancy light. Wu-ming and Letitia just held hands and the contract ceremony was over. Is it over? Black Rabbit stared at Wu-ming and Letitia curiously with her big rabbit eyes. Ren was also curious. As for the three problem children, although they were not as obvious as Black Rabbit and Ren, Wu-ming still noticed their curious gazes. At that moment, Wu-ming could only smile helplessly. What do you want to see? A dazzling magic array? Xiaofan shrugged as he walked over to the sofa and sat down. Letitia also followed Wu-ming over, but she did not sit down with him. Instead, she stood behind Wu-ming. She was completely treating herself as Wu-ming's dependent. Well, Letitia, although you are still my dependent, you don't have to always follow me. Nominally, you are still a companion of no name. Wu-ming corrected Letitia's thoughts. However, Letitia was more stubborn than Wu-ming imagined. But master, you are indeed my master, aren't you? Letitia feels that there is nothing wrong with serving master. Letitia smiled slightly. I am a member of no name, but before that, I am master's dependent. This made Wu-ming somewhat helpless. Wu-ming always felt that his dependent incarnation had the intention of brainwashing. However, Wu-ming's thoughts were not wrong. After all, this was an ability evolved from the combination of two gods' authority and Wu-ming's own power. How could it be as simple as a contract? Once a contract was signed with Wu-ming, whether it was forced or voluntary, this contract would subtly make the dependent who signed the contract truly become Wu-ming's person, whether it was physically or mentally. Well, after all, Mr. Villo has already become Senior Letitia's main god. I think Senior Letitia's approach is not wrong. Black Rabbit smiled. It didn't matter what it was, as long as their companions could be together with everyone in no name, safe and sound. This was Black Rabbit's simple and greedy way of thinking. Lord God or whatever, you can't actually say that. No, forget it, just think of it that way. Holding on to the idea that the more he explained, the messier it would get, Wu-ming simply allowed the Black Rabbit to fantasize. It was fine as long as it did not cause any harm. I am quite envious of you, little brother. Now you have a blonde lowly maid. I would like to try it. 16 Knights jokingly said enviously. However, 16's words made Letitia's eyes slightly lit up. It was not only Letitia's interest, but Haru's interest as well. You don't say, I haven't enjoyed being served by a blonde maid before. He had to admit that Distant Bird was indeed a young mistress. It seemed like she had quite a few maids at home. Envious. Haru's face was, who was a fake who was a who was a who was a who was a who was and who was who. I have received service from many people, and I have even received service from people of other races. Wu-ming said as if he was reminiscing. In Connaught, although Wu-ming was Maeve's guard, in that place where the strong were respected, Wu-ming was still very respected. In Camelot, as an extremely senior knight, Wu-ming also had many servants. In Uruk, Wu-ming had become a god, so naturally, the service would not be less. Wu-ming's entire Nazalic was Wu-ming's, so naturally, he had many subordinates. Wu-ming in the God-Slayer's world was also treated as a king, and Wu-ming in Rick's world also had a group of sky-wing species. Thinking about it this way, was Wu-ming actually a person of the bourgeoisie? Oh. Then have you ever received service from a blonde maid? Haru asked with interest. As expected of a young mistress, she really was an evil bourgeoisie. Omega although I don't have a blonde maid, I do have a blonde female knight in another world. Wu-ming thought of Erica, who was also a young mistress like Haru. Speaking of which, she is also a young mistress of a European noble family. A noble female knight. Letitia's eyes turned cold. Letitia emitted a slightly terrifying aura. Wu-ming was stunned, but he immediately reacted. As a vampire, Letitia was known as a knight of the box court. In this way, her attributes were duplicated. Golden-haired, noble, knight, and silent subordinates. This made Letitia a little unhappy. Cough cough. But she didn't become my dependent. She only serves me in name. When Wu Ming said this, Letitia's terrifying aura dissipated. I'm sorry, Master, your power is a little too strong. I can't control it for the time being. Letitia bowed to Wu Ming and apologized. Just the fluctuation of her emotions caused a change in her aura. It was enough to show that Letitia's strength had recovered. Senior Letitia, are you really okay? Do you need to rest? Black Rabbit looked at Letitia with slight worry. There were also drawbacks to suddenly obtaining great power. It meant that she was not proficient in controlling it. There's no need, Black Rabbit, I'm just not used to it. I'll be fine after a while. Letitia expressed that she wanted to stay by Wu Ming's side. At this time Wu Ming spoke. Since Letitia doesn't want to, then don't force it. After all, after becoming Wu Ming's dependent, Letitia was like a spring resurrection. She did not look weak at all. Speaking of which, little brother, your blonde loli is really interesting. 16 Knights looked at Letitia with fighting spirit. Obviously, Letitia had aroused 16 Knights' interest in the strong. Speaking of strength, Wu Ming wanted to ask something. Right, Letitia, how was your strength before? Wu Ming looked at Letitia behind him. My strength before? If I didn't lose my quintessence, I would be in the 4 digits. Letitia thought and responded to Wu Ming. 4 digits, huh? Wu Ming nodded. In Wu Ming's opinion, 16 Knights' strength should also be in the 4 digits. And now, after becoming Wu Ming's dependent, Letitia's strength should have returned to the 4 digits. In short, it should not be worse than before. Oh, interesting to be able to have a blonde noble in the 4 digits be your maid, little brother. You're really lucky. 16 Knights laughed and teased. And I need a lot of people to serve me. Haruai Toshi said lightly. It seems that your experience is more interesting than we thought. Jio Yuki said with interest. Jio Yuki's words also got Haruai Toshi's agreement. Agreed. I want to hear the Villo's story from before. The story from before. Wu Ming thought for a while. There was nothing important at the moment, so it was not impossible to talk about it. Then, Wu Ming looked at everyone's interested faces and smiled. Well, in that case, I'll talk about my story. Chapter 603. Everyone sat around the coffee table in the meeting room, listening to Wu Ming telling his story. Then. Did you really defeat the last king? Didn't you say that he's immortal? Jiao Fei Niao leaned forward like a child, looking at Wu Ming in anticipation. Although Rama is immortal, it doesn't mean that he can keep fighting. I'll just beat him back to his original form. Wu Ming shrugged. Original form. Black Rabbit was shocked. Could a god be beaten back to his original form? Wu Ming smiled helplessly as he noticed Black Rabbit's shock. The original form I'm talking about is his weapon, the Savior Divine Sword. Since he's the last king, the hero, the gods gave him an amalgamation of countless god relics. That's the Savior Divine Sword, Wu Ming said and waved his hand. A sacred sword appeared in Wu Ming's hand. It was the Savior Divine Sword. However, since Wu Ming was in his spiritual form, the Savior Divine Sword was not the real thing. Instead, it was the spirit of the Savior Divine Sword. Just like a servant's relic, it was not a physical relic. Instead, it was an amalgamation of powerful magic. The Savior Divine Sword was just like that. If someone defeats him, he'll return to the Savior Divine Sword. When he returned to the Savior Divine Sword, I replaced him and squeezed Rama out of it. Everyone gathered around the Savior Divine Sword immediately. It's really a powerful weapon. Ren looked at the sacred sword in Wu Ming's hand in all seriousness. He could feel a powerful pressure from the sword. You squeezed Rama out of it? I'm really curious how you did it. Jiao Fei Niao tapped the Savior Divine Sword softly. Wu Ming smiled helplessly. That's just a metaphor. I've just replaced Rama as the last king. If that's the case, aren't you a god? 16 Knights put his hands in his pockets. Actually, I have been one for a long time. Wu Ming stared at 16th Knights with his dead fish eyes. Although Wu Ming had only told the story of the God-Slayer world, he had also told everyone about the God of Disobedience and the parallel world. After all, if Wu Ming were to bump into someone like Romo in the courtyard, it would be awkward if he didn't know who that person was. Wu Ming also told everyone that he had once been worshipped as a god. Yes, yes, Lord Ghost Deity. 16 Knights waved his hand casually, looking rather perfunctory. By the way, Villo, since you've obtained the Blade of Salvation, did you inherit the godly equipment as well? Jiao Yuanfei asked as he toyed with the Blade of Salvation. In response, Wu Ming smiled. Of course, I won't return those divine artifacts to the gods of that parallel world. As Wu Ming spoke, he tossed the Blade of Salvation away gently. In an instant, the Blade of Salvation flew behind Wu Ming and disintegrated in the air. In the next moment, the space behind Wu Ming fluctuated and the outline of a square appeared. Then, a phalanx containing all kinds of weapons with golden hair and ancient auras appeared behind Silent Blade. Everyone was stunned. Judging from the ancient and powerful aura, they were sure that those divine artifacts were authentic. However, there was a trace of strangeness to these genuine goods, as if they were mirages. That was because the Blade of Salvation was a spiritual body. Even the weapons in the mandala square formation were spiritual bodies. Wu Ming felt that he was becoming more and more like a hero spirit. His body, relic, and everything else were similar. Of course, as long as he could find his original body, everything would be fine. Maybe it's because the last king is Rama. The storage space created by the gods is similar to the mandala square formation, Wu Ming said as he put away the mandala square formation. My master is really an incredible person, Letitia, who was sitting beside Wu Ming, said with a smile. After all, Wu Ming took a long time to tell the story. Hence, in the middle of the story, Wu Ming asked Letitia to sit down. I'm grateful for everything that I've encountered. It's because of those stories that my life is so fulfilling. Wu Ming's open-mindedness made the members of No Name look at Wu Ming in a new light. Are you an imposter? Jiao Yuanfei squinted her eyes. Why? Why do you say that? Wu Ming asked awkwardly as he did not understand. The Villo is obviously a problematic child. How could a problematic child say something like that? Haruhibe Yoshi nodded. That's why, little brother, you have to learn from us. 16 Knights spread out his hands with an arrogant expression on his face. Then, 3 slapping sounds were heard. Slap, slap, slap. Black Rabbit took a paper fan and hit 16 Knights, Asuhibe Yoshi, and Yoshi's heads. The 3 of you are problematic children. Although Mr. Villo is slightly problematic, compared to the 3 of you, Mr. Villo is much more stable. Don't lead him astray. Black Rabbit looked at the 3 problematic children angrily with a paper fan, warning them not to lead Wu Ming astray. Wu Ming touched his nose in embarrassment. Then, the 3 problematic children answered Black Rabbit with a smile. Don't worry, we'll definitely take action against the Villo. You 3 problematic children. Ah! Black Rabbit was going crazy. Then, Ran, the good guy, started to mediate between them. He stopped watching Black Rabbit and the other 3's farce and looked at the sky outside. Unknowingly, it's already so late? Wu Ming said faintly. The sky outside was already dark, and the sun had already set. As Wu Ming's wife, Letitia spoke. Indeed, Master. Your story is very fascinating. Lily came here once before, but because she saw that Master was so interested in your story, she left on her own. Oh, Lily came before? I'm sorry, Wu Ming said apologetically. The Lily that Wu Ming and Letitia were talking about was the oldest child besides Ren. She was a cute half-beast lowly. The 3 meals for the contestants in No Name were basically prepared by Lily. Previously, when Lily came to look for them, it was probably to invite them to eat. However, because everyone was too engrossed in Wu Ming's story, it was delayed. All right, it's already very late. Lily and the others must be waiting anxiously. Let's hurry over. After stopping the farce between Black Rabbit and the problematic children, everyone left the meeting room and went to the cafeteria. Somewhere in the forest that belonged to the end of the world, Glea and the unknown girl were brought to a cave by the unkillable Maxwell. Just as they reached the entrance of the cave, 2 figures walked out. A man with a cloak, whose face could not be seen clearly, and judging from his height, he looked like a 10-year-old child. A woman with a similar cloak and a golden harp, whose face could not be seen clearly, walked out. The woman walked beside the boy, and it was obvious who was in the dominant position. "Did something happen?" the boy asked. As soon as the boy spoke, Glea and the girl bowed their heads respectfully. "Sorry, Your Highness, we met his soul." The girl who was stabbed by Wu Ming lowered her head and said guiltily, "If it's him, it's not strange that you're not his match. Being able to escape from him with just a little injury is already very good." His Highness seemed to know about Wu Ming's strength, so he did not blame the girl. Then, His Highness looked at Maxwell. "Thank you, Maxwell. If it weren't for you this time, Ling and Elder Gu would be in trouble." However, in the face of His Highness' gratitude, Maxwell did not seem to appreciate it. "I'm just following orders. It's better to be careful in the future. After all, even if I were to face him, it wouldn't be so easy to deal with him," Maxwell said casually. He still remembered that his body was shattered by Wu Ming's blow. If it weren't for his special body, he would have died long ago. His Highness did not say anything about Maxwell's disrespect. Ignoring the issue of position, after all, Glea and Ling were able to come back this time because of him. "Your Highness, what should we do next?" the woman beside His Highness asked. His Highness smiled casually. "Isn't that Demon King going to collect companions? I have a feeling that No Name will definitely go against her. We just have to wait and see." Glea, Ling, and the black-robed woman replied respectfully. "Yes." Only Maxwell did not respond to His Highness. However, His Highness was used to it. However, being used to it did not mean that he could tolerate it. Chapter 604. Wu Ming's time in the box court didn't pass slowly. After Letitia's gift competition ended, Wu Ming acted as if he was living in the library. If he had nothing to do, he would stay in the no-name underground library, flipping through books to supplement his knowledge. Ran and 16 Knights would also come to the library from time to time. The former wanted to increase her knowledge as a community leader, while the latter was simply interested in books. It had to be said that 16 Knights was surprisingly smart. As a result, the male core members of No Name became friends of the library. As for Jio Asuka, Haruai Hiroyuki, Black Rabbit, Letitia, and the other women, when they had nothing to do, they would chat and have tea parties. And when they had nothing to do, they would participate in the gift competition. By the way, 16 Knights and Ren were the same. After all, the two of them came to the library to read in their free time. They weren't like Wu Ming, who almost treated the library as his home. Because they showed off their skills in the gift competition held by Perseus with Letitia as the prize, they also made a name for themselves. Although no one came to join No Name, now No Name wasn't a community that everyone looked down on. At the very least, No Name changed from the No Name that was invaded by the Demon King to the No Name that has some ability in the name of defeating the Demon King. No matter what, it was better than not having anything. The three problem children participated in various gift competitions because of their interest. As the community leader, Ren also participated in a few gift competitions that weren't too difficult, but she spent most of her time in the library with Wu Ming. As for Black Rabbit, she continued to do the work provided by White Yuxia, acting as a referee to earn money for the community. Although Wu Ming sold Perseus after Letitia's gift competition, because the No Name people thought that it was Wu Ming's private property, they rejected Wu Ming's unconditional gift and chose to borrow it. In fact, it was mainly the three problem children who were making a ruckus. Words like, "I don't accept charity," and "I'm ashamed of it," kept coming out of his mouth. This made Ranha Black Rabbit subtly reject Wu Ming's donations. Left with no choice, Wu Ming could only use the excuse of borrowing to lend most of the money from Perseus to No Name. Thanks to this, No Name's food became better. After all, the money that Wu Ming lent to No Name was half of the assets of Perseus after the sale of Perseus. A community that was originally worth 5 figures was worth a lot of money. But why was it only half of his assets? Cough cough. After all, Wu Ming was also short of money. Although Wu Ming could sell some of his treasures for a good price, he had to keep the good stuff for himself. And now, the situation had turned into a situation where Black Rabbit was working hard to earn money for Wu Ming, its creditor. Even if it was its partner's money, Black Rabbit would not take it for granted. It was not strange for it to work hard to earn money to repay Wuming. Actually, the most important thing was Black Rabbit's race. The Moon Rabbit was a race that sacrificed and contributed. This kind of freeloading made the Black Rabbit feel a deep sense of guilt. Wuming could not say anything, so he could only let Black Rabbit do whatever it wanted. However, there was one thing worth celebrating. Black Rabbit finally did not have to sell its body to earn money. It listened to White Wuxia and changed into specific clothes. Its reward for being a judge would be doubled. White Wuxia was angry for a few days because of this. Wuming once again took out some good stuff to share with White Wuxia. Only then did White Wuxia stop throwing a tantrum. Wuming could not help but doubt White Wuxia's integrity. All in all, no name had begun to prosper. In the morning, Wuming woke up from his sleep. The first thing he did when he opened his eyes was to look at the sunlight outside the window. Although Wuming looked like he was going to live in the library, that was only a metaphor. Wuming was still living in the room he had chosen. What a nice weather. Wuming stretched and slowly sat up from the bed. That's why, Master. Don't stay in the library anymore. Go out for a walk and participate in some gift competitions. Letitia's distressed voice came from Wuming's room. Wuming did not find it strange that Letitia was in his room because Wuming had basically spent his days in no name like this. Wuming went from not adapting on the first day to being casual now. It could only be said that time really changed a person. 16 nights and the others are enough. I'd better read honestly, Wuming said casually. However, it's still better to go out for a walk. Even as a ghost, I can't stand staying in the library for a long time. While speaking, Wuming looked at where Letitia was. Then Wuming, who was staring at Letitia's figure, did not know whether to laugh or cry. At that moment, Letitia had removed her red jacket and replaced it with a blue and white lowly maid outfit. By the way, on the first day that Letitia became Wuming's dependent, she had appeared in Wuming's room dressed like this. Otherwise, with Wuming's temperament, how could he not adapt to having a girl in his room in the morning? The thing he was most uncomfortable with was Letitia's maid outfit. Although I have asked many times, Letitia, I still can't help but ask, as my dependent, why do you have to wear a maid outfit? Wuming asked, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Then, although this subordinate has answered Master many times, this subordinate will still answer you that this is the necessary equipment to serve Master. Listening to Letitia's serious lowly voice and looking at Letitia's serious lowly face, Wuming really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In Wuming's view, Letitia was definitely interested in the maid, that 16 Nights said before. Although I don't like maid outfits, in order to better serve Master, this subordinate deliberately endured the humiliation and chose to wear this outfit, Letitia said seriously. However, in Wuming's view, Letitia was completely enjoying it. However, Wuming had given up struggling. Anyway, Letitia wearing a maid outfit was not bad. Just treat it as eye candy. Shaking his head, Wuming moved his body and prepared to get off the bed. Master, do you need to wash up? Letitia was really like a maid. Asking Wuming. Same old rules, Wuming said casually. Letitia nodded, then Letitia's shadow floated, and some toiletries appeared. Wuming was not surprised by this scene. Because Letitia had been serving Wuming since the beginning, and Wuming was used to it. After a few minutes, Wuming finished washing up. Then under Letitia's service, Wuming walked out of the room. As soon as he opened the door, Wuming saw an acquaintance. Oh, you're finally up. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.